Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the fifth meeting of the Sunset Subcommittee of the Legislative Commission. We will call the roll first. For those members attending virtually, would you please turn on your cameras and respond when you hear your name? Mr. Jameson, if you're ready, would you please call the roll?
Senator Lang. Senator Pickard.
Here.
Senator Spearman. Assemblywoman Kasama.
Here.
Assemblywoman Marzola.
Here.
Ms. Rankin.
Here.
Ms. Brown. Mr. Cheney. Chair Howdy.
Here.
Thank you, Mr. Jameson. Please note we do have a quorum, and please mark members present as they arrive. Before we begin, I would like to take a moment to go over some basic housekeeping items. First, for committee members and those attending, please silence electronic devices, especially cell phones and laptops during the meeting. For those joining on Zoom, please be sure to mute your microphone when you are not speaking to minimize background noise. For members, I would remind you to please keep your cameras on at all times. That will help us ensure that we have a quorum. For individuals on Zoom, I would like to remind you that the chat function should only be used for communication between members and presenters for requesting technical assistance with BPS. Please do not ask questions, provide comments, share links in the chat features. Those need to be made available to the public and should be made verbally. If you wish to testify in person, please sign in at the table by the door and leave a business card. If you do not wish to testify, you still may wish to sign in to leave a record of who is interested in a particular issue. When testifying, please remember to turn on your microphone and state your name clearly for the record, and then turn off your microphone when you are done with your testimony. Meeting materials can be found on the subcommittee's webpage. Anyone who would like to receive electronic notification and access to the subcommittee's meeting agendas, minutes, and final report can do so by signing up on the legislature's website. Finally, due to potential scheduling conflicts, I will be moving agenda item 4, our work session, to the top of the agenda after public comment. Okay, with that, we will move into our first agenda item, which is public comment. I would like to remind those who are here in person and those listening online that there are 4 methods in which you can provide public comment. You can provide public comment by calling in and dialing 1-669-900-6833, then entering the meeting ID, which is 830-2317-5555, and pressing pound. You can also email comments to the committee's email address, mail comments to the Research Division at their address 401 South Carson Street, Carson City, 89701, and by faxing your comments into 775-684-6400. We will have 2 periods of public comment, one right now and one following at the end of the meeting. Public comment is limited to 3 minutes per caller or person providing comments. With that, I will start public comment with anyone here in Las Vegas who would like to give public comment. Okay, seeing no one running to the table, I am going to check Carson City. Is there anyone in Carson City wishing to provide public comment? Okay, seeing no one in Carson City, I am going to go to the phone lines. BPS, would you please check the phone lines for anyone wishing to provide public comment?
Chair, if you would like to provide public comment for today's meeting, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Once more, that's star 9 now to take your place in the meeting. Thank you, Chair. The public lines are open and working. However, there are no callers wishing to offer public comment at this time.
Okay, I have actually just been aware that I will actually have all of my committee members throughout the entire hearing. I don't lose my committee member till after 2 o'clock. So I know I saw some smiling faces thinking we were going to take work session first, but I am actually going to wait for our vice chair to be present for the work session. So I will continue with taking the agenda in order. And seeing with no one here and public comment for on the phone lines, we are going to go ahead and move into our next agenda item, which is agenda item number 3. So our public hearings concerning the continuation, termination, modification, or consolidation of certain entities, commissions, and boards. Agenda item number 4 gives us the opportunity to consider the entities listed on our agenda for review today. 2 of these entities were selected by members of the subcommittee at our February meeting, while the remaining 2, the Advisory Council for Family Engagement and the Competency-Based Education Network, were added for review at the request of the Nevada Department of Education. I will remind the members at the and the public that pursuant to statute, any entity under review is required to submit information about its members, its powers and duties, its budget, and a history of its meetings and an assessment of its effectiveness in serving the people of Nevada. By statute, the council or committee has the burden of proving that there is a public need for its continued existence. It is my understanding that there is someone here joining us from each council or committee who will provide a brief overview. These individuals will be available to answer questions from members. With that, we can get started with our first entity under agenda item number 3A, which is the Nevada Transportation Authority. We have Director Terry Reynolds and Chair of the Nevada Transportation Authority, Don Gibbons, on Zoom to provide a presentation. For the committee members, just to provide you a little history, the authority has been previously reviewed by the Sunset Subcommittee. At the work session on the June 16th, 2016 subcommittee meeting, the subcommittee recommended terminating and consolidating the functions of the Nevada Transportation Authority with the Taxicab Authority in a new executive department. However, the subcommittee's recommendations to consolidate the NTA and the TA were considered and omitted by the Legislative Commission's motion to direct the Legal Division LCB to prepare a bill draft request on behalf of the subcommittee. Director Reynolds, so good to see you here this morning. And Chair Gibbons, thank you for joining us as well. When you're ready, if you would please provide the committee with an overview of your Transportation Authority.
For the record, my name is Terry Reynolds. I'm Director for the Department of Business and Industry. It's good to be with you this morning. Chair Howdigi and members of the committee, thank you for this opportunity to address the committee concerning 2 of our divisions within business and industry, the Nevada Taxi Authority and the Nevada Transportation Authority. I have a few brief comments before we hear from our agencies. So I'm going to just do a high-level overview, but I think there's important things that we need to that need to be discussed. In April 2020, the Taxi Authority hit a low point of, believe it or not, 12,210 cab rides. It's amazing that we had as many of that at that time because most of all the hotel properties were closed. In the past month, April 22, the Taxi Authority count was just under 1.2 million rides. And we're now seeing where we're back to about 1.2, 1.3 million rides a month. So that's a far cry from where we were. We're back to 2019 levels and actually eclipsing those levels in the current market. The fiscal year, there has been significant increases in visitor traffic due to new hotels, the opening of several new events, venues, as well as the resurgence of convention traffic. However, convention attendance is only about 50% of where it was in 2019 due to the lag time of bringing conventions in. With the increase in visitors, there has been positive impacts to shuttles, charter buses, and limos. It's been good to see charters, shuttles, and the buses lined up at the airport again. In fact, this morning as I came in, it was good to see a series of buses and shuttles lined up picking up passengers this morning. Drivers have come back for TNC and Uber and Lyft, but have not returned in large numbers. In fact, there's been a significant decrease in drivers across the board in all types of transportation. This is not just a Nevada issue, it's a national issue. There are a lot of competing jobs and circumstances that have contributed to the absence of drivers in the industry. There's health concerns, there's insurance costs, there's competitive job market, there's the price of gas and drivers going on to other TNC platforms, food delivery. That's a burgeoning industry. There's been a lot of discussion on that and actual controls that have been placed in local markets here, but still that industry has grown. The taxi medallion count is currently at 3,530, which has remained consistent since 2020. The taxi lease decal count is at 959. These are for leased cabs, which is up about 8.9% over 21. So currently, there are about 15,000 active Uber and Lyft drivers, actually all TNC platforms. So we went from, when we started at a high of, and I think this is important to realize, we had a high of over 50,000 drivers with TNCs, Transportation Network Companies, and today we're probably half of that, and only about probably 20% of that number are active drivers. So it's really tough. And with you see that, you can see the impacts at the airport with people waiting long lines, long wait times to get transportation out to the Strip or to their hotel or wherever they're going. So where do we find ourselves today, and what are our challenges? With the increase in visitor traffic, new hotels, and event venues, we need all the transportation options available to handle our increased traffic. And before we were looking what's going to happen with the industry, what's this transportation option going to do? Today we need everything. We need all those options to handle the traffic. All you have to do is you see what happens after a Golden Knights game or a Raiders game in terms of people trying to get transportation back to their hotels or to where they're going. We need to modernize our agencies and the laws that govern them. The regulatory construct is 50 years old and does not meet the industry or regulatory needs. Most of our taxi laws and laws governing shuttles buses were basically put together in 1969, 1971. So, and we've had little modification of that. Now, our TNC laws were done, about 5 years ago, but still they are becoming out of date because of autonomous vehicles. So the taxi industry in many areas, I can tell you, is overregulated. In NRS, we actually regulate the fact that they have to have floor mats and many other things within the industry. In other areas, TNCs and other state laws need to be modernized. Transportation has become more dynamic and will continue to change with the utilization of autonomous transportation vehicles. We're now seeing that. We're seeing a lot of testing going on in our communities of autonomous vehicles. They're operational in several states. San Francisco they just went operational for autonomous vehicles for taxis. They're also operational within Arizona. For our divisions, we need to change the compensation and benefit structure of our compliance officers. If I can stress the most important thing that we need to do is we need to take a look at the compensation for our enforcement officers. We have constant turnover. It's extremely difficult to get qualified people to come to work for us. And for that matter, for any enforcement agency, whether it's Metro, whether it's DPS, whether it's our agencies, it is very difficult. And this is a national issue. This is not just something that happens in our local communities. It's a national issue, but we need to do something, and we need to do it now. Because we're not going to get good qualified people. We're not going to be able to enforce things. It's a tougher job today than it was a few years ago. We see more crime. We see more issues out on the street. We see more issues on the Strip. I think you're very aware of that. Just read the newspaper and see what happens on a daily basis. Without first tackling these issues, it really doesn't make sense to consider consolidation. When we looked at Dr. Hardy's bill in the last session, it was 300 and some pages long. It just shows you the issues that we have in the regulatory construct of what we have to regulate these agencies. We need to tackle those issues first before we consider consolidation. It would be an absolute mess if we tried to throw things together today with all the issues that we see within NRS. It is an old, outdated construct. And I want to just leave you with that before I turn it over to our agencies. And I thank you very much for the opportunity to give an opening statement on this.
Thank you, Director Reynolds and
Thank
members.
you.
I would like to let you know that Director Reynolds did provide a memo to the committee, and for those listening online and watching as well, that is available online at the legislature's website. Again, the memo that he was reading from is available. Director Reynolds will be here to answer questions. He did give an overview of both entities that we will be reviewing, the Nevada Transportation Authority and the Taxicab Authority. So we are going to take those separately. We will first take an overview from the Nevada Transportation Authority, and then we will have opportunities to ask questions of Chair Gibbons and Director Reynolds. Then we will take the Taxicab Authority next. So we will hold off on asking Director Reynolds any questions until we take item 3A. And with that, I believe we have Chair Gibbons on Zoom to provide an overview of the Nevada Transportation Authority. Oh, Chair Gibbons, I do believe you are on mute. We can't hear you.
Okay, can you hear me now?
We can.
Okay. All right. I was actually prepared more to answer questions, but I can tell you a lot about what we're doing. We've had, even during the pandemic, we have done very, very well. And we were with the Taxicab, both of us came in June of 2020. It was about, I think, 15th or 16th, because we felt the need was very valuable for transportation. So we came in a lot earlier than other agencies because transportation is most needed in every state. I have to tell you, our director did a very good job in explaining everything. We also have Taxicab in Northern Nevada. We cover 6 counties in the north, and then Nye County in the south. And we did have Winnemucca that had taxis, but they went under during the pandemic a little bit before. So it's been a little bit hard for the taxi cabs, but now we're seeing great growth in Washoe County, the 6 counties that are most important there. And so we're very excited about that. That's kind of been a turnover that we didn't expect. The TNCs, they've, I think the highest we've ever had was in 2018. It was about 0.84405. Of course, they had to redo their system. So we weren't really quite sure what the real timeline is, but the best probably was 40 to 44 that we've had. And today it's been 26,946. And I think the reason being is they just can't hire enough people. And the people that were there before are not there enough. And I don't want to get into their business on that side, but it is down. We've had some great growth in the limousines, and we're actually, and we have to watch a lot is it's a lot more difficult to be out there. In the Reno office right now, we only have 1 supervisor and 1 investigator, and because we haven't been able to fill the other one yet. But they have to go, all over the state except for Clark County, and it's been a real tough way to run an agency when you don't have enough people in the north, because we go through all these counties that have vehicles. Even Elko has it, and so does Allen, but in addition to down here. So I looking at the Las Vegas area, and it's very difficult there because they're taking pictures of our enforcement people. They're following on. They know what they look like, what their family is, and there's some really tough people that our compliance enforcement people have to deal with, and it's dangerous. And we try to do everything to keep them safe. But again, you don't know who you're getting to when you're trying to do your business every night and day. So is there anything you want to ask me questions on? I'm probably pretty good at that.
Thank you, Chair Gibbons. And I do have a couple of questions, and I just for the committee, I would like to remind the committee that the Nevada Transportation, and correct me if I'm wrong, Chair Gibbons, but the Nevada Transportation Authority oversees all of the transportation, buses, charters, taxis for TNCs, with the exception of taxis in Clark County. So if your questions are specific to taxis in Clark County, then we will save those for the Taxicab Authority. But any other of the transportation that falls under the Nevada Transportation Authority would be directed to Chair Gibbons or Director Reynolds. I do want to start with just a couple of questions from the form that was submitted. And Director Reynolds, I know that on two of the questions, one of the questions was, are there any recommendations for consolidation? And then a follow-up question was, are there any questions for statutory changes? And no was provided for each of those questions. But then in the memo, the follow-up memo that you provided, you did say that there is a complete modernization of agencies and regulations that needs to be done. So are you going to be providing the committee, or can you provide a committee with what those recommendations are, because they were not provided in the document that was requested to be filled out?
We're developing those recommendations as we speak, and you will hear from Chairman Reeser and our administrator, our new administrator, Carl Armstrong, which we're very pleased to have with the Taxi Authority. But they're working on the regulations that they have within the Taxi Authority. We are looking at the entire issue of both entities and how we can improve those entities. As I said, we have so much that's in NRS that we really need to take almost in like an interim study and take a look at transportation within our state and what we can do to improve not only the how we license drivers, how we license vehicles, but how we regulate the industry over time. And Chair Gibbons is correct. It is a much more difficult job for officers. It's a much more difficult atmosphere that we have, whether it's in Washoe County or Clark County, dealing with our limos, the buses, the operators that we have. For example, the events that were probably not contemplated in 1970, the Electric Daisy Carnival, meeting with them this afternoon regarding how we go through and register the buses that they're going to bring in people. And we're very grateful that they do that. But, it's difficult for us to be able to handle, to stop everything, to go through and register, inspect 30 to 40 buses that'll be operating at a time to be able to do that. And also at the same time, to keep illegal operators out of the system coming in from all over. That happens on a regular basis. We just don't have the personnel to be able to handle that the way we should to do that. Anyway, so there's a lot of issues that we are currently looking at. What gets us the biggest bang for the buck in terms of operations and in terms of being able to cover all the areas that we see in that. I will tell you that, and this is probably too much to go through, but I'll try to cut it short. But they're different cultures, they're different aspects. The Nevada Transportation Authority has a very excellent administrative process, not taking away from the taxi authority, but they have more of a defined administrative process that they use. They may go through as many as 140 to 150 items every time they have a docket for hearings on issues of licensing, bringing in new companies, getting them licensed, or license issues with existing companies and operators that they get fined for whatever transgression that may happen. The issue with the taxi authority is just taxis, but they are dispatched, unlike NTA. They are out on the street working to make sure that the taxis in Clark County follow the laws, but they're also looking for illegal operators. We do combined stings between NTA and the TA to be able to handle certain events and times when we have to. But they have different missions, different focuses, whether it be tow car operators, whether it be buses, whether it be movers. So we really need to modernize the laws that we have. We need to look at the regs that we have and making sure that they fit the types of issues that we see out on the street.
Okay, and I know that we need to modernize. Do you think you'll have enough time before our next, we have one committee meeting left of the Sunset Subcommittee. So is this are you going to have recommendations for the Sunset Subcommittee for any statutory changes, or is this an endeavor that you're going to take on for an interim study?
This is an endeavor we'll probably be taking on for an interim study.
Okay, so there will be no.
Real frankly, to be able to take a hard look at it, I just don't think it's going to. It's not something we can pop out in the next 30 to 60 days. It's something that really needs to sit down with the industry and take a look at what their issues are, what our issues are, and work together to be able to modernize the construct that we have that regulates our transportation within our communities.
Thank you, and I appreciate that. I mean, I chair the Sunset Subcommittee, I chair Commerce and Labor, I sit on Legislative Commission and Interim Finance Committee, and chair the Audit Subcommittee, so I have a lot of state agencies that come before the committees I'm on, and I know exactly what you mean. It's the same comments that we're hearing from every state agency, some who are operating with 26% vacancy, 32% vacancy. We had one agency before us, an audit, that was operating with almost a 50% vacancy. It was 40% something. So it's something that's felt throughout the entire state, the need to fill those positions, and it makes it difficult for every agency to do their job if they don't have the capacity to do it.
The other thing too is that the industry has come back, which is good, as Chair Gibbons has said, and you'll hear that from Chair Reeser and Administrator Armstrong. The industry is coming back dramatically, and that's a good thing. But with that, it's put pressure on us to make sure that we have the people that we need. We're looking at the organization, and you'll hear that with our budget. We're looking at our organizations and how we can reorganize those entities to be able to get the best we can out of our enforcement staff, our licensing staff, and the control over that. We haven't changed those organizations for 30 years, and it's time that we take an internal look and restructure those entities. So we're going forward and looking at that. I'm working with Administrator Armstrong on that. We've had discussions with Chair Reeser also as to the organization and how we look at the taxi authority and how we manage the staff and how we can get the best out of that staff. We're also looking at the NTA, and we're going to be looking at how we can better the enforcement of that. However, I will tell you that with what they have, they do a pretty darn good job. I'm very proud of what they've done, and the new compliance chief, Todd Parks, has done an outstanding job for them. But still, there's things that he's talked to me and said, Terry, we need to do these things. And so we're working on that to be able to do that. That's internal, but there's the external issues of the constructs that they work under with the industry works. And the industry has a lot of comments and a lot of positive things that they'd like to see too.
Thank you, Director Reynolds, and we do appreciate all of our public employees who are working with who are probably doing more than what they should be doing, filling extra roles. Thank you.
Thank you.
I do have two questions regarding the form that was submitted to the Legislative Council Bureau that's required to be filled out. And either Chair Gibbons or Director Reynolds, you can answer this one. But question number 13 mentioned that there was a regulation that has not been adopted within the deadlines for adoption. The Tow Carrier Hardship Tariff Program per AB 301 Section 2. Can someone walk me through that regulation and why it hasn't been adopted?
Hang on a second.
Chair Gibbons, I believe,
Yeah.
unmuted herself.
Thank you. We are scheduled, I think, in the first week of June for that. We did not have an administrative attorney for quite some time. She came in later in last year. It's been very difficult for us in trying to, the tow people, we had one meeting and one of our commissioners said, no, we'll just, maybe make it real easy and they can pay $2.50 or $5. And that just couldn't happen, okay? So we have really worked hard trying to understand, and almost some of the, legislation was from the bottom to the up, to the top. And so we think we have a way of addressing it where the tow carriers can fall in and do okay with it. They're probably not going to like it, but we've come up with a solution that we think, and I've talked to the gentleman who carried the bill, and I've asked him questions because it was very hard to figure out what exactly they wanted. So, but we've come to terms with it, and we've worked very hard, and I think that you'll be happy with what we come with. The taxicab, the tow carriers might not be so happy, but again, if not, we'll have another meeting and work well. I think we have till October, right?
Thank you, Chair Gibbons. Director Reynolds, did you want to weigh in or?
I just, it's been very difficult for us because we have lost a lot of our administrative attorneys, and we've actually now been able to rehire people to work on that. We had issues with, LCB had the same issues in terms of them being able to review and go through the changes that we have made for regulations. That seems to be much better now, and we're staffing levels have come up, especially with our administrative and administrative attorneys that we have for our division. So I think we're back on track to be able to get those things done. And as Chair Gibbons has said, we've had meetings with the industry, and we'll continue to do that to be able to work out the compromise. But we're working through, and we'll have that later this, probably by September, October.
Thank you, Director Reynolds. And that was actually the last question I had. I'm going to turn it over to the committee members to see if they have any questions for the Nevada Transportation Authority. I'm going to start with Vice Chair.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, Director Reynolds. How are you?
Good.
So I just had a couple of questions here, and this really deals with, I'll start from the bottom. So a lot of the issues, as I understand it, are because of personnel shortages. And so my question would be, is there any way that we might look at automation to make up the difference in terms, and you can't do that for an attorney, I don't think, but for some of the other positions, is there any way to look at how we might be able to do some things with automation so that the deficits, because it'll be peaks and valleys, and just want to make sure that you don't have any loss of efficiency. That's the first one.
Terry Reynolds for the record. Senator Spearman, thank you. Excellent question, because we have invested a considerable amount of money in taxi on automation and working with our data systems with that. We're going to try to go to the next level, and you'll see some budget requests for that within there. But that has really helped our licensing people. The other part that we have is being able to, with our smart meters, is to be able to track cabs, be able to look at where the congestion points are, where we need to have them. But the other part of it is we need to have, the enforcement, we need to have boots out on the street too. So to answer your question, yes, we are looking at that, and yes, we're trying to put together, and I think Mr. Armstrong and Mr. Reeser will be able to address those issues with you, but we need to continue that. In addition, with the NTA, we are looking at a data system for them too, to be able to track drivers, to track the issues that we have, to track enforcement issues, and their data systems are old and need to be updated. So we're looking at a comprehensive way to handle that. The TA has the advantage because they have basically trip revenue that goes to their data and automation functions, where NTA doesn't really have that. And I've suggested that they look at some kind of a technology trip cost that will be able to help across the board for all their drivers, to help them fund that type of system so it's equally distributed against their users, not just on one segment. And so that's something I think that we need to look at, something that we're going to bring as a budget request in this next session. So I think that's important that we keep up that data, because that'll help us pinpoint and be more effective with our enforcement and be able to have the data we need that shows what we need to do out on the street. And so our officers will be more efficient when they get out there.
So the other thing, if we look at some of the other states, I'll say in the Western region, are there any best practices that might be identified that might help move you along as you look at how we need to change, what needs to go in terms of legislation or not, as you upgrade, modernize, and all those things that you were talking about at the beginning? Are there any best practices that you've looked at? And I'm thinking specifically about CSG, Council of State Governments, and then NCSL. There may be some ideas there that might be helpful, and so if we got around, we'll invent it. We don't have to invent a square one.
Terry Reynolds, for the record, I totally agree with you, and we are looking at that. Las Vegas is probably one of the more complicated transportation communities within the United States. We compare with areas like Miami, New York, Dallas, and so we tend to look at those larger cities. I think we have some new and very good operators within the industry now that are looking at ways that they can upgrade their systems and be able to, without mentioning any names, but they're looking at what they can do. They are developing ride demand platforms that are becoming very effective in terms of being able to get and dispatch cabs and dispatch shuttles and everything to areas that need it immediately. And that's shown some very good promise. I think they're going to be expanding that. In terms of Uber and Lyft, they're struggling now still with the food platform's probably doing very well, but they're struggling with getting drivers. And that's a national issue. And I was just reading about, what other communities, and other communities are facing the same issues that we are. So this is not something that's unique. Now, are we looking at how they're going to be handling that? And we're looking at what best practices they have? Yes, we are. And we'll be looking at that to see what we can do here.
I promise I won't dominate the session. So you mentioned with respect to EDC, the buses, and the complexities of making sure that you have buses that are licensed and making sure that everything, all the protocols are in place. What are the penalties and consequences? Because sometimes if people know the price they have to pay for not following the rules, they'll follow the rules.
I will, Terry Reynolds, for the record, I will tell you that the NTA has a pretty strict, and Chair Gibbons can tell you, they impound vehicles. They basically, if they catch an illegal operator, they get right on it and impound that vehicle, and it costs several $1,000s to get it out. they're not shy about doing that. So I think from an enforcement standpoint, they're good in terms of what they have, and they tend to have some pretty heavy fines for illegal operators. The issue, though, is having enough manpower to be able, or people power, to be able to handle these events and be able to get enough people out. And we tend to put together task force to be able to do that. But we're seeing that more often than not now. And so it's, which is good news for the community, but also makes it more difficult in terms of what we have in terms of getting bodies out there to be able to enforce.
I'm going to jump in before you ask your last question because I have a follow-up to that. Do you keep track of what percentage of the vehicles that go, like, say, to this festival are illegal operators? Or how many, or do you keep track of how many vehicles you're impounding or how many illegal operators you're finding a year?
I'll throw that off to Chair Gibbons, but yes, we do.
Okay.
But
Yes, we have those statistics, and I'll be happy to send anything you want, Madam Chair.
If you could provide those to the committee so we could, so we
will
could
do
share them
that.
with all the committee members, that would be great. Thank you, Chair Gibbons. Okay, Vice Chair, your last.
That's okay, it's relevant. So, and with respect to that, if there are repeat offenders and how many times they repeat, and I don't know what the consequence would be for that, but the last question would be, as we're moving more and more away from fossil fuels and into renewable energy, I know RTC has a couple of hydrogen fuel cell buses, and we have a hydrogen fuel cell company in Nevada. Are there any plans to look at that complementing what we're already doing with EVs, hydrogen fuel cells, EVs, and I don't know what other renewable energy resources might be, but I'm thinking about how fast, how quickly things are changing with respect to fueling transportation. And so if there's something that can be put in place either legislatively or administratively now that would allow you to grow, something that would be fluid, something that's dynamic and not static, so you have to come back to the legislature each time you want to make a change. Does that make sense?
Terry Reynolds for the record, yes, it does make a lot of sense, and I think I know the industry is looking at electric vehicles. The issue that they have is right now is trying to get vehicles. That's been part of the problem, and our Administrator Armstrong and I know Administrator Gibbons, we've talked about the fact that it's very difficult for us even to get our fleets updated because the vehicles are not there. So the cab taxi industry, shuttles, limos, they're also having trouble just getting vehicles right now, let alone getting EVs or hydrogen vehicles. But I think that's on the horizon, and I think that once we get out of the pandemic issues and get to more normal circumstance in terms of where we can get vehicles, we can renew our fleets, where they can renew their fleets, I think that you'll see the changeover. But right now, they're just trying to keep their fleet alive and trying to get vehicles out on the street.
Committee members, any questions? I'm going to check those on Zoom. If you have a question, if you would just raise your hand. Okay, I do have one more question for either Chair Gibbons or for you, but you compared us as a city to New York City and the way we operate, right? Not the way we operate, but in the amount of traffic that we have and the amount of taxis out on the street. And I'm not sure if either Chair Gibbons or you know the answer to this, but does the state of New York and the city of New York operate in the same manner that the state of Nevada and Clark County operate, where they have two entities? Because I'm assuming the state of Nevada doesn't have the same transportation needs as New York City does. So does New York City has its own transportation authority to govern taxis just within New York City?
I do believe that is true. Did I turn
Chair
off
Gibbons, yes, we can hear you.
Okay, I do believe that's true. We've actually done a good job in comparison that we have the strip here, and we've, even I've talked to people that at Bellagio and different people that want to find out a way how we can get the congestion off. And I don't know, with autonomous vehicles coming in, if that's going to be good or bad. But we have to get some of these vehicles off. And one of the things I wanted to state, and I think you asked this question, is with buses, we're having a difficult time getting leases for buses or limousines because there's not enough in Vegas. So it's, well, you live there, so you know how hard it is to get around the Strip. And so we really have to get our heads together and do something. And I know I'm just the regulatory person, but I do care about people. I'm also thinking about with autonomous vehicles coming in at some point, what do we do with the drivers? How do we get them into a place where they can make a living? So I think we need to think about these things because it's going to hit us, and we want to take care of our people.
Director Reynolds?
Terry Reynolds for the record, Chair Huddy. I'm going to defer that answer to the presentation by Administrator Armstrong and Chair Mr. Reeser. We have had a lot of discussion about medallion costs, and I know you know that in New York they used to be $1 million a medallion or plus, and that has dropped considerably down with their system of how they look at that. But I think there's some issues that we could do with our medallions here to create a more even playing field, to be able to get all our medallions being used. They're not all being used. If they're not used over a period of time, they probably should be basically reallocated. But I'm going to let them discuss that.
Thank you, Director Reynolds. And I have two more questions, but I think they're better suited for when we're in the Taxicab Authority presentation. So
Right.
For the Nevada Transportation Authority, I'm going to do last call for questions. Okay, seeing none. Thank you so much, Chair Gibbons. Oh, it looks like we do have one from Senator Pickard. I just saw him raise his hand.
Yeah, thank you. I just couldn't resist. It's more a comment than a question. I think Director Reynolds, the first words out of his mouth kind of summarized the reality of the situation. We are grossly over-litigated or over-regulated in this area. And I think that, in my opinion, the best approach would be a wholesale revisiting this from the statutory level on down. But that's for others to do and not really for this committee. But anyway, I just thought I'd toss that out there. Director Reynolds, you do a great job with what you have to deal with.
Thank you, Senator. Okay, thank you, Chair Gibbons, and thank you, Director Reynolds, for being here to present on the Nevada Transportation Authority. Members, that's going to take us to our next agenda item, which is agenda item 3B, an overview of the Taxicab Authority. Okay, and with us, I believe we have Director Reynolds, we have Carl Armstrong, who's the Administrator of the Taxicab Authority, and Dan Reeser, the Chair of the Taxicab Authority. Members, just so you know, the Taxicab Authority was also reviewed in 2016 by the Sunset Subcommittee, and as previously noted, the subcommittee recommended termination and consolidation of the functions of the Taxicab Authority with the Nevada Transportation Authority in a new executive department. Thank you for joining us, Director Reynolds, Administrator Armstrong, and Chair Reeser. When you're ready, if you would like to provide us a brief overview of the Taxicab Authority, and then we will open it up to questions from the committee members. Thank you.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the committee, subcommittee. My name is Dan Reeser, and I am the an appointed member of the Taxicab Authority Board and was elected by its members to serve as their current chairman. The Taxicab Authority Board is comprised of 5 of fellow Nevada citizens who serve voluntarily. The current composition is myself, an attorney, private practice attorney with 40 plus years of experience, former Public Utilities Commission Chairman Don Soderberg, J.D. Decker, who is was our interim administrator, but is a bureau chief at the Department of Public Safety. Cindy Rodriguez, a former lieutenant, now retired, of the Metropolitan Police Department. And Roger Thompson, the vice chairman, who is a retired former nuclear physicist who has a passion for the taxi industry. The board was in the statutory scheme is a traditional part of a traditional Nevada two-tier regulatory agency where you have a citizen board that exercises quasi-judicial power. So we adjudicate matters that are determined by the agency that are either come to us directly, like a application for a certificate of public convenience and necessity to have a cab company. So that is similar to how the Public Utilities Commission operates. And then we also adjudicate on appeal contested cases that come up from the agency, anything from fines that are levied to revocations of licenses to drive. So we hear those matters. We are also a quasi-legislative agency, so we do the rulemaking that is done by the agency pursuant to delegation from the legislature. I have only been on the board since July of last year, but I can say this in the bigger context of my experience. My primary practice is before the Nevada Gaming Commission. I'm a gaming lawyer. And I would impress upon the subcommittee that the taxicab industry is pretty vital to the hospitality and tourism industry in Southern Nevada. And so whatever the subcommittee might determine needs to ensure that the level of regulation remains robust and the support to get the industry or keep the industry moving ahead technologically and competitively is not lessened in any way, shape, or form. I'm going to answer a couple of questions you had already. Nevada is not wholly unique, but as to the regulation of taxicabs, it is a pretty checkered system across the United States. As to New York, it's a city commission. The city determines who has a medallion for a limousine or a taxi. Actually, there's some history of some fair amount of corruption in the process, the city process there. But a number of jurisdictions follow the New York model and have city or county regulation of taxis. Out west, a lot more states have state agencies. The taxicab authority under NRS 706818 has to operate in Clark County, but there is kind of a statutory, people have a little bit of statutory amnesia. A county can opt in to or out of regulation by the taxicab authority. And at this point, everybody but Clark County who cannot opt out has opted out. So the regulation of taxicabs elsewhere in the state is by local election. And that's part of the statutory scheme that was set up. And I believe that, the history of that was to make sure that in the most populous area that is the most similar with regard to intermodal transportation of major metropolitan areas, that we had a regulatory agency and scheme that was similar to what other states had. It is important to remember that it is a law enforcement agency, and its purpose is to protect the traveling public and to make sure that that the certificate holders are able to operate a competitive but solidly financed and capable business. I'm happy to answer any other questions. I'll just touch on a few things that we have recently done at the board level that are responsive to some of your questions. Last month, we had a presentation on technology providers who are thinking of developing or have developed in some other jurisdictions and pilot programs the same kind of an application for a cell phone for cabs that you use for an NTC. I'm sorry, TNC. So the Uber app would have a counterpart that would be a Taxicab app that could be used ubiquitously across all platform or all of the companies who adopted the technology. We have been looking since I became chair at both legislative, whether we need legislative changes, because the agency, the board with the agency sets rates. So we're a rate-setting agency like the Public Utilities Commission. And we're looking at what authority, if any, what authority needs to be changed there to allow us more flexibility, or if the current statutory scheme is satisfactory. We've also been working with the former interim director and now Administrator Armstrong to hold industry workshops where they can identify for us parts of the regulatory scheme that they think would be helpful to have fixed. We've identified as a board some things that we think need to be worked on. In particular, practice and procedure rules are very arcane before this agency. They're from the late 70s, early 80s. So there's needs to be streamlining in processes. But those are some of the board level actions that we are taking as far as moving the agency forward, while we're also hearing CPCN applications and appeals and other matters that come before us. I'd be happy to answer any questions now or later after Administrator Armstrong gets down into the weeds with you.
Thank you. Why don't we let Administrator Armstrong provide comment first, and then we'll open it up to questions. But Administrator Armstrong, it's my understanding that you are fairly new to the department, so I want to welcome you.
Yes.
Welcome.
Yes.
Congratulations.
I've been on the job about a month at this particular point and have looked at a number of issues that we presently have in terms of the taxicab industry. I've also had the opportunity and the pleasure to meet with all the taxicab operators at this particular point in time, as well as meet with my staff and figure out exactly what we need to change to make the organization better. One of the things that we have had a problem with, as the same with the NTA, is staffing. We're at about half of the staffing levels that we were 2 years ago. That was pre-pandemic. We are down in terms of the number of enforcement officers that we presently have on the street are probably between 5 and 6. That is not enough officers to have on the street when you're regulating 17,000 cabs and 3,330 medallions and 17 total operators. We have a number of divisions within the office that are also understaffed. We have a dispatch area that dispatches our enforcement staff to different incidences and also makes determinations relative to undercover operations that we have. We have a licensing staff that licenses both the permitted drivers as well as licenses the different companies to operate within the Clark County area. We have a staff that specifically does audit. Basically, we receive confidential information from all the taxicab companies in order to determine financial viability as well as what they are providing in terms of how they provide service throughout the region, and we analyze that information in order to make determinations, set rates, and other things of that nature. We also have an inspections division. Basically, what they do is they go out to the taxicab companies and basically inspect their vehicles to make sure that those vehicles as well as those meters are in working order and in the condition that we have ordered them to be in. Our enforcement division also does a lot of work in terms of unauthorized rides that take place. This past month, we've done at least 17 or 18 impounds relative to unauthorized rides, and we've been finding individuals in excess of $10,000 per offense, especially if the individuals are frequent flyers or people that have been sanctioned before either by us or sanctioned by the NTA. But as I said before, what I think we need is a larger staff. One of the other things I think we need is that we need basically both a regulation overhaul as well as a legal overhaul. But we have to take this process slowly in order to make the determination as to what we need. We started the process in terms of meeting with the industry, in terms of asking them what exactly is your wish list in terms of regulations that you feel are outdated or things that we need to do things better. We've had the first of those workshops about a couple of weeks ago. We're going to have continuing discussions with them as well as our staff in terms of what we need to do in order to make both our accounting regulations as well as our specific regulations more user-friendly in terms of doing the things that the industry needs in order to make the industry stronger and make the industry more competitive within this market. We also have a concern about what we call the Golden Triangle, which is the Strip, downtown, and the airport versus the neighborhoods. We would like to find ways in which you have drivers to go to the neighborhoods and service the neighborhoods as a component of a transportation model for this community, because that's an area that we have to do. We also have to work with the Department of Aging dealing with senior services, and that's something that we're going to work on and try to make that happen in terms of making that better, because we want to make sure that our seniors can get from point A to point B in terms of the things that they have to do. But a lot of these things, we also have to understand that we're working with private entities. And so part of it is also engaging with them, finding out what they want, but also at the same time, there's a tension that exists in terms of also being their regulator too. So my role is a twofold role. One is to be a cheerleader for the industry, but my other role is to make sure that taxis are safe, drivers are safe, and everything is safe for the riding public. That's what a main role that we have in terms of that we have to do. So that sometimes creates a tension between us and the industry, but I don't think the tension is as strong as it maybe once was. But I think that part of the way in which we can make it better is to basically talk to each other and understand each other's position. There are going to be times in which we as the board and we as the agency are going to say no to the industry for certain things because certain things are non-negotiable. But there always is an ability to talk, an ability to have a discussion with people to try to come up with the best taxi service that we can have for the people of Clark County. And if you have any questions, I'm more than willing to answer those questions if you want.
Thank you, Administrator and Chair, and I do have a handful of questions.
Sure.
And I know that Vice Chair does too. I just want to start quickly with, you had mentioned that you're at half the staffing levels of your pre-pandemic levels, and if I wrote this down correctly, I just want to make sure. Did you say that you only have 5 to 6 enforcement officers? So like five
to six enforcement officers. We have a couple
out at a
of
given time or in total?
In total, because the other officers are supervisory officers at this particular point. We're in the process of hiring at least 4 additional officers at this particular point, as well as 1 supervisory officer at this time. So we are still down staff, but we are trying our best at this particular point to hire additional staff in order to basically meet the needs that we have. But I don't even think once we get up to full speed, based upon the positions that we have presently open, that we were going to ask you as a legislature to give us more positions so that we can better serve the traveling public. One of the things that we need is, I believe, is based upon the statistics and things of that nature, is a dedicated investigation unit to deal with unauthorized transport and basically violations that take place. But we don't have that because I'm having a problem in terms of juggling both the staff that I have in terms of trying to have them being out on the road and being doing events and things of that nature, with having a smaller group of people that can do basically undercover stings and things of that nature. That's something that I would like to develop, but I don't at this particular point have the staff to develop that unit that I would like to develop, and I would hope to get that sometime in the future.
Okay, and then if you only have, like, currently, let's just say it's 5, you said 5 to 6, 5, and then you hire 9, I mean, at any given point, how many officers are on the street at any given time?
The number of officers that would be on the street, if we hire the 9, we would have actually 9 officers on the street. The rest would be sergeants, but they would be roaming around. There would be 3 sergeants, 1 for each shift, 1 for afternoon shift, 1 for morning shift, and 1 for swing shift.
So just 3 out at any given shift?
Yes.
Okay. And then that leads me to my next question. Now, I'm assuming the enforcement officers and the staff they're not funded through the fund, or are they funded through the Taxicab Authority Fund?
They are funded through the Taxicab Authority Fund. They're the fees that are promoted by the agency. The agency is totally funded by the industry.
Okay. Welcome, Director Reynolds. Do you want to make comments on any of those before?
I do. Terry Reynolds,
Okay.
for the record. There's several ways that we fund the agency. One is that for technology, we have a technology fee, but it's based on trips. And so when our trips were down, keep in mind that testimony that 12,200 and some trips, and now we're up to 1.2 million. But it is so important. We lost an incredible amount of revenue during the pandemic because there just wasn't the trip generation to support the agency. So we basically had to give up positions. Now, a lot of those positions were vacant to begin with, but when we had like 14 vacancies that we basically could not fill because we didn't have the revenue to fill them. We came in 19, I believe it was, we got an increase in medallion revenue, which helped. Still, that's incredibly low. It hadn't been changed for 30 some years, and so basically we don't get outside revenue to be able to support it. We have to deal with the industry on the trips that they make to generate the revenues to get the income that we need to operate the agency. So we're now seeing an increase, obviously a dramatic increase in trips, which is going to mean that we're going to have additional revenue, which will be able to mean that Mr. Armstrong can hire more enforcement officers within the agency. But we still need to look at stabilizing to keep a baseline, so we're not going through and having to restaff everything. And people resign and walk out the door, and that's quick. But the hiring process takes months. And frankly, not to be too critical, but it could take us 4 to 5 months to get a new person in from the time that we have that position vacant. So long story short, we need to have probably some stabilized fees that are generated through the medallions that are out there to do that. But we can't overprice the industry out because they need to have the trips to be able to generate their income too. So we're looking at what the mix is to be able to provide a more stabilized revenue pattern for the industry and for the operation of the taxi authority.
Thank you. And that actually leads me to my next question. And my next question was regarding the number of trips. I know you had mentioned we were at 1.2 million now, but that's only with a 50%, you had mentioned in your memo, a 50%, operating at 50% convention, right? So when we get to 100% of the conventions that we were at pre-pandemic level, I mean, are we going to have the capacity and number of taxis out there to support the traffic coming through Nevada? Because you had also mentioned that the TNCs were down from 50,000 to 25,000, but of those 25,000, only about 20% are operating.
23%.
Yeah, 23% are operating. So are we going to have this transportation capacity to support the tourism and visitors once we start operating at 100%, conventions? And
Well, I think that's the issue. The trips, we're seeing 1.2 to 1.3 million a month now to our busy months, which is very good. Keeping in mind before TNC's operation, we were at 24, 25 million trips a year in taxis. So we fell down considerably. We're probably now half of that. We're estimating a little over 13 million. I think we're going to eclipse that, probably 13 to 14 million trips this year, which is excellent. We haven't seen that for a while. In 2021, we were at a little over 8,600,000. And so we have grown considerably on that, but that's trip revenue. And so we need to have a base revenue to keep a base of staff to be able to just to have a constant level of enforcement out on the street and licensing staff to be able to run the agency. And frankly, we haven't had that. And this has been extremely difficult to be able to keep up and basically keep a skeletal staff on to be able to handle the enforcement that we need to do. It's coming back, and I think it'll improve dramatically. But do we have enough people to handle? No, we don't. Do we have enough cabs? I think the industry will respond to that, and they are responding. We're seeing more lease cabs. We're seeing more utilization of the cabs out with the medallions that are out there. But it's gonna take a lot more than just 3,500 cabs and another 1,000 lease cabs. It's gonna take a lot more transportation options to be able to move people around through this community.
I have a few more questions, but I'm going to turn it over to the committee members, and I'm going to start with my vice chair first.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I have just a couple of questions. What? I ask the questions and the director sends the mic the other way. Okay.
I'm happy to answer, but
Okay, it's all right. So, you know, they're saying if you build it, they will come. And I remember when I retired and moved here in 2006, they were working on 15. And I think it was like maybe 3 lanes, and now it's like 4 or whatever. And it was crowded then, so they put extra lanes, and it's crowded again. So the question would be, are there any plans in the works to do something with respect to mass transit?
I think that when we're talking about transportation, I think that it's a multi-tiered operation. We're talking about the RTC, we're talking about limos, taxis, everything. We're all part of the same group that I think there is enough rights for everybody in terms of what we're talking about. But what we have to do is we have to coordinate our services so that we provide a service that is comprehensive throughout the valley so that everybody who wants a ride can get a ride depending on what that method of transportation they want to do. That we all have to work together and we all have to talk together in terms of coming up with that unified transportation plan that we're talking about.
So I'm thinking more specifically that we can increase, 10,000 more cabs and 5,000 more TNCs. But I think the real issue is because there's only so much the infrastructure will be able to handle. I don't know how they're going to grow, I-15. I don't know how we're going to get more lanes in there. So my question would be, and this is not just for infrastructure, but it's also for the environment. Are there any plans, are there any discussions about some type of mass transportation coordination? So instead of having 2 people ride in 2 different cabs, you can have 5 people, sitting at the front of a bus or something like that. So less carriers, but provide more transportation, more transportation options. Does that make sense to you?
It does, but we have a lot of moving parts when we deal with something like that. We have private companies that are involved. We have both county agencies and things of that nature that are involved. And it sounds like what you're asking is something that would possibly have to be like a rideshare legislative change in terms of something of that nature, and not something that we individually can do unless we can agree that that is the way in which we should operate in the future.
Yeah, no. And so the operative word is discussions, and I'm trying to make sure that we're thinking long term, because eventually we will not have the roadway space for all of the increases, and so some type of discussion, and I don't know, Director Reynolds, maybe you can answer that, some type of high-level discussion that looks and says, in the future, we probably want to make sure that we have bus routes that go here or go there, and we want to make sure that we have where the bus routes end, maybe there's taxicab service there. Want to make sure that as we're planning, especially for like the charging stations that are coming up, the EVs that are coming up, what does that look like for buses, electric buses that we're getting? So I'm looking at a high-level discussion to say in 2030, we're supposed to be at 50% renewables, and that's supposed to reduce the carbon footprint. So in 2040, what does transportation look like? And does that include mass transportation?
So Senator Spearman, not affiliated with this, but I'm also on the, and I have been on for 6 years now, the state, what they call the TPAC Committee, Transportation Planning Advisory Council with NDOT. And so we're looking at those issues. We just spent a couple hours yesterday working on transportation issues in the rural areas and getting people from point A to point B for medical issues, for work issues, for necessities, everything from food to care to prescriptions. So, but that is an issue, and I keep reminding them we need to be planning in terms of how we plan within our urban areas and the ring around those urban areas and how we get people in and out of our communities, from the outside the urban area to the inside the urban area, how we deal with our visitors, because we can't keep adding lanes to I-15 or 95. We've got to be able to come up with the structure and the resources to be able to handle our transportation needs internally without having just to build bigger. And we need to have more carriers, and we need to have better operations in terms of that. So I'm a voice on that committee, and I've been trying to work through those issues, but they are looking at it. They are revising the transportation plans. They are looking at everything from freight to internal transportation within the communities. They're working with the RTCs. They're working with private transportation companies. They're working with bus companies. They're working with the rail and airports within the state on how we move people back and forth. So that is happening, albeit probably not as fast as everybody would like, but it is happening, and the alternatives are being developed to be able to look on how we move people within our communities and outside of our communities.
And that's what I was going for, to make sure that its conversations are horizontal and vertical. There are 3 sessions after this one coming up in 23 before we get to 2030.
Right.
And so keeping it on everybody's mind, what that looks like, developing a plan so that, each entity that's part of transportation in Nevada, everybody is looking, when they sit down with a crew, with an eye towards, we have to make sure that we're coordinating for mass transportation. We have to make sure that I think someone mentioned, it might have been Director Gibbons, that, as autonomous vehicles come online, they're going to be displaced workers. And that's what happens with technology. Disruptive technology does exactly what the first part of that sentence does. So everybody has to be consciously and cognitively aware. And it's not just the transportation issues, it's also the health issues. Because most of the transportation nodes, the major transportation nodes, are very, very close to BIPOC communities where you have a higher rate of respiratory issues, heart disease, and on all those sorts of things. And so it's compounded by, we can't build enough lanes, and also what are we doing to the people who this is their only method of transportation. So conversations horizontal, but lateral. And like I said, you got 3 sessions between now and 2030 to achieve that, 50 by 30, 25, 27, and 29. And when Sine Die comes in 29, we better have a plan in place to meet 2030, or somebody has to have a BDR in place that extends it out. But so that's where I'm going.
I totally agree with you.
Thank you, Vice Chair. And that was actually one of my questions on here is what's the responsibility of the Taxicab Authority in helping us reach our like greenhouse gas, emissions goals, right? Which is, again, we have our 2030 goal, but then it's net zero by 2050. And so as you're thinking of modernization and what you guys are doing to completely overhaul the Nevada Transportation Authority and the Taxicab Authority, I think electrification, as transportation being one of the largest contributors to greenhouse gas emissions, electrification of, fleets.
And having those discussions with the industry is fully aware of that. And also, $5 and $6 of gas has a tendency to make you think even more about that kind of issue. So a lot of them are moving. We have one operator that is moving into propane as one of their major. One company is deciding that they want to electrify their fleet by a certain point in time, and they believe that these are economic good things to do, so that these things are happening, but other things are pushing them more toward being more green and being more efficient, and that's what the industry is going for, at least at this particular point.
Thank you. And before I ask my questions, I'm going to go to the rest of the committee. Those on Zoom, or if you raise your hand if you have a question. Okay, then I'm going to go ahead and continue to ask my questions. Now, can you talk to me a little bit about the health of the Taxicab Authority Fund? I remember from my last two sessions on Ways and Means that we, during post-pandemic, that, the fund got critically low. And now with the resurgence of trips and the continuous increasing of trips, can you talk to me a little bit about where the health of the fund stands now?
Well, the health of the fund at this particular point, I believe we have a $2.5 million at this particular point reserved. The amount of money that we spend per fiscal year in terms of budget is between about $4.2 million. So that's a total of like a $6 million amount of money per fiscal year that we use. That is growing because of the increased number of trips and the increased number of rides at this particular point. We expect that to continue to go up, and we would be asking that we use some of that money in order for both technological upgrades as well as people upgrades in order for us to be able to better serve the industry.
Thank you, Administrator. And one question. So when we were talking about enforcement and only having, 5 to 6 enforcement officers out, hopefully growing that to 9,
Yes.
Do you share information with the Transportation Authority?
Yes.
And so then you guys do cross share, so you guys you'll be able to monitor if someone who's operating illegally in Clark County also was violated by the Transportation Authority.
Yes.
Perfect. And do you happen to know, Director Reynolds, this might be more geared to you, do you happen to know how many enforcement officers the Transportation Authority has statewide? And if consolidation was something that was recommended after an interim study, would that help with the enforcement because you'd be able to share resources?
Terry Reynolds for the record. I can't give you the number right off the top of my head. I know that Chair Givens can probably do that, and I will get that for you in terms of where they're at today in terms of that. We do have an MOU between the two agencies, and we can do joint enforcement activities, and we do joint enforcement activities on a fairly regular basis. So that's not something that has to happen through consolidation. That can happen today, and we are working on, we've gone through and worked on the protocols, and Administrator Decker, Interim Administrator Decker, when he was here, he and I basically rewrote and modified the MOUs to be able to have more cooperative effort between the two agencies. But that is happening, and so I'll get you the actual numbers. Keep in mind that the NTA still struggles to do the work that they have to do. And they have, not only do they have cabs, but they have limos, shuttles, buses, movers, tow cars, and, special events that they deal with when people bring in buses and shuttles to be able to deal with that, where the taxi industry doesn't have that. So they can be more concentrated on what they do. But to be real frank with you, both entities need more people, and they need more higher paying positions in their enforcement so that they can attract good people. We get young people, we train them, and then they leave and they go to the state police, or they go to Metro, or they go to other law enforcement agencies throughout the state. So it's very difficult for us to keep people because we don't have the financial ability to be able to progress them, through the ranks and keep them.
The other thing is that we also have cooperative agreements with Metro, Henderson Police, as well as North Las Vegas Police. They also help with certain enforcement actions because our officers pretty much, what we want our officers to do is basically enforce 706, which is our statute that deals with regulatory concerns, but they also are Category 2 police officers too. So they do have ancillary functions in terms of acting in that role. And we also ask for the help of Metro and the other police departments if the role of the ancillary roles are somewhat too large. Like, for example, if something happens and we come upon 2 pounds of cocaine, we would ask Metro to help us with that part of the operation as opposed to our officers inventorying and that, even though they would have the right to do that, inventorying that kind of thing. So we do have cooperative arrangements with those police departments in terms of helping us with some enforcement actions.
Thank you, Administrator. And I just had one last question, and it was regarding something Chair Reeser had mentioned, the development of new technology that would operate on your phone, kind of similar to the TNC technology that exists, and it being a future technology that could be possible for the taxi industry. Is that technology available now in other jurisdictions anywhere, and is it operating now, and how, if not, how far out are we from getting that technology? Because I can see that being a healthy dose of increased rides for the industry.
So the status of our review, of the board level review on that, is that we, as I indicated, have had a presentation explaining to us how the technology should work, or is intended to work. It is in pilot beta testing in a couple of jurisdictions where the technology developers have gone to particular taxicab authorities, one in Texas, I believe, and one in Chicago, if I'm remembering correctly, where they are testing the technology, and they're not ready yet to roll it out fully. What we've asked for the companies that are developing the technology is that they come back to us with examples of how those pilot programs were developed and what, if any, statutory or regulatory changes were necessary in those jurisdictions to facilitate that, so that we can determine what it might take for us to be on the list for early adoption. So that's what we're doing.
Thank you. And you said you requested that they come back with, information. Did you guys set a date, come back to us by this meeting?
At this particular point, I've had also meetings with them too, and they have provided me some information in terms of some of that beta testing. And that's going to probably be on within the next 2 to 3 months in terms of our board looking at their technology and also having this discussion that we're talking about.
Okay, thank you. And then now I'm going to turn it over to last call for questions. Those on Zoom? Okay, I want to thank you guys for being here and answering our questions. I want to welcome Administrator Armstrong. Thank you for being here. I know you were in the hot seat. You've only been here for a month, so I appreciate you with all of the information you gave us, and welcome and congratulations on the position.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Director.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, members. We're going to move right along to our next agenda item, which is agenda item 3C. And the next entity for review is the Advisory Council for Family Engagement. The Sunset Subcommittee previously reviewed the Advisory Council for Family Engagement in April of 2016. At its work session, the subcommittee recommended continuation of the council with statutory changes. In 2017, Senate Bill 301, on behalf of the Sunset Subcommittee, revised the name of the Advisory Council on Parental Involvement and Family Engagement to the Advisory Council for Family Engagement and modified the council's annual reporting requirements. Joining us in Las Vegas is Albert Quintero from the Office of Parental Involvement and Family Engagement of the Nevada Department of Education to discuss the council. I believe Mr. Quintero is on Zoom. I can see him there. Mr. Quintero, when you're ready, the floor is yours.
Yes, good morning, Chair Howdy and Vice Chair Stearman and the rest of the committee members on the Sunset Committee. My name is Alberto Quintero, and I am the Education Programs Professional for Family Engagement here at the Nevada Department of Education. Just quickly want to apologize for the sniffles, getting over a cold, so you might hear me sniffle here and there, so apologies for that. I can go ahead and give a quick overview in regards to the Advisory Council for Family Engagement, whose duties and responsibilities reside in NRS 385620. So in summary, the Council works to facilitate family engagement by reviewing the family engagement policies adopted by the State Board and Board of Trustees. The Council also reviews effective family engagement practices carried out by school districts and other states to increase family engagement and the feasibility of carrying out those practices statewide. The Council reviews information regarding communication with and participation of families and annual accountability reports and districts and charters, and identifies methods to communicate effectively and provide outreach with parents, legal guardians, and families who may have limited time for engagement or who are limited English proficient. The Council works to identify ways that family engagement affects the performance, attendance, and discipline of students and collaborates with the Office of Parental Involvement and Family Engagement to assist with completing each other's duties in NRS. Quick note in regards just a summary of Council membership. So the Council consists of 11 members in total, 2 parents or legal guardians of students enrolled in public schools, 2 teachers in public schools, 1 administrator of a public school, 1 representative of a private business or industry, 1 member of the Board of Trustees of the school district in the county whose population is over 100,000 or more, so Clark and Washoe, and 1 member of the Board of Trustees of a school district in the county whose population is less than 100,000, so all remaining counties. These members are appointed by the State Superintendent of Public Instruction. The remaining members of the Council consist of the President of the Nevada PTA, or a designee nominated by the Nevada PTA President, a member of the Assembly appointed by the Speaker of the Assembly, and the member of the Senate appointed by the Majority Leader of the Senate. I do want to take note that there is a small correction on the Sunset Committee review form that was submitted. I learned as of Friday, so after the materials were posted, that we had 2 new legislative appointees to the Council. So they're no longer Assemblywoman Benitez Thompson, Senator Cancela. They are now Senator Sandra Loop and Assemblywoman Garlow. And so any questions? And I know I also have a recommendation as well.
Thank you. Mr. Quintero, you said you do have a recommendation, correct? I know we said we have it in the document that you filled out, but did you want to go ahead and discuss the recommendation?
Yes, absolutely. So Alberto Quintero for the record. Thank you, Chair. So quorum has been difficult ever since the start of the pandemic, especially considering that a few of our members are also work in schools. And so knowing that there is a teacher shortage and also a substitute shortage, it's been pretty difficult to find coverage for members to attend council meetings. Historically, consistent attendance from our legislative appointee positions on the council have made it quite difficult to achieve quorum, since legislators must also attend to their legislative responsibilities, especially during legislative sessions. To allow for greater flexibility and engagement from council members, we are requesting NRS to expand the eligibility of legislators who legislators can appoint. Currently, the Speaker of the Assembly appoints 1 member of the Assembly, and the Majority Leader of the Senate appoints 1 member of the Senate. This can be expanded to allow the Speaker of the Assembly and Majority Leader of the Senate to appoint any designee to the council.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Quintero. And I do have a question, because you're saying that you have difficulties making quorum because there's one legislator from the Assembly, one legislator from the Senate, and sometimes, 120 days every other year we're in session, so it makes it difficult for you to meet quorum, but that's only 2 of your 11 members. So even if the 2 legislators weren't present, I'm assuming everyone else was, you would still have a quorum to meet.
Yes, and so just historic, I've been at the department for about almost 5 years, and our legislators on the council, I think have attended. I know it's only Denise Thompson attended consistently when she was appointed, but prior to that, we've had a tough time getting legislators, and so now that we start with 9, it's usually the same 6 or 7 folks on the council that are consistently having to attend, and definitely makes it a lot more difficult for our administrator and 2 educators to consistently attend. So we normally meet every other month. So that's quite a bit of ask in terms of educators stepping out of the classroom. I know the past few years we've gone without meeting, and last met in April on the 18th of April. And so it's just allow greater flexibility for legislators, understanding that there are those 120 days that are legislative session every other year as well.
Thank you. Are there any other statutories that would help us, changes that we could make to help you make quorum?
Alberto Quintero for the record. So the only recommendations that I have are regarding the membership construct of the council as of that.
Okay. Thank you. I'm going to turn it over to our committee. I'm going to start with our vice chair and then Senator Lang.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I guess my question would be difficulty making quorum. One of the things that a lot of people liked about, few things that people liked about the pandemic was the ability to get 3 meetings within 4 hours because you didn't have to go anyplace, just Zoom, Zoom, Zoom. So do you all do hybrid meetings now? Have you considered that? Because for teachers who are in the classroom, if you adjust the meeting time, it may be better for them to just have the opportunity to just sign on via Zoom after the classes or whatever are held. Do you do that? And if not, why not? And would you consider doing that?
Thank you for the question, Vice Chair Spearman. So Alberto Quintero for the record. So yes, we do have a hybrid. So at the beginning of the pandemic, we did offer video conferencing, and then also currently now that folks are now coming back to in person, we have the boardroom in Carson City here in Las Vegas, and then also allow for folks to call in via life size.
And with that, you still have difficulty making quorum.
Yes, and at least in regards to the pandemic, it's just really tough for our school community members who serve on the council to find any time. Oftentimes, when they do have time during their prep period, they're being asked to cover other classes as well.
So instead of having the meeting like now, in the middle of the day, had you considered adjusting the meetings to perhaps maybe 4 o'clock and do the hybrid or maybe even all virtual? Because that might help, because I think the voice of the educators is very important. And you can have a quorum without them, but I think that the discussion is less rich and less intrinsic. So moving the time so that it would be more convenient for them. Have you thought about doing that?
Thank you for the question again, Vice Chair Spearman, Alberto Quintero for the record. So yes, we offered multiple times in regards to when the council to meet. Historically, they've always looked at 9 a.m., which obviously is not the most ideal time for folks who work during the day and have their own responsibilities. But then we run into the issue of members on the council having to pick up their kids after school as well. And so it's been very difficult to find a time that works for everyone, especially when we're just looking at essentially 9 members.
Senator Lang?
Thank you, Chair. I am also want to zone in on that, on the makeup of the committee, because if you're having trouble meeting quorum, then I'm concerned about the vacancies for the Board of Trustees. And I'm wondering what, it says that there was a previous appointment, they're no longer a trustee. But I would think there probably have been no longer a trustee for a while. Why hasn't the committee received an appointment for that position? Because that would help your quorum situation.
Yes, so currently we are waiting for a recommendation from the Board of Trustees to submit a nomination for us to review.
And and if I could ask, when did the vacancy occur?
Yeah, so the previous member, Melina Raymond, she had renewed her term prior to her departure. And so she was serving up until about a year ago, where she finally left and her position vacant.
So, and is that person from Washoe? Where are they from?
Correct, yeah, that representative was from Washoe.
Okay, but the appointment could be from Washoe or Clark, because it's the population 100,000 or more, correct?
That is correct.
So for a year, we've been trying to fill that position?
Yeah.
See where I'm headed? It's been a long time. And if we're having trouble meeting quorum, then I'm just trying to figure out where the hangup is.
Yeah, so great question. So Alberto Quintero, for the record, it's been very difficult during the COVID pandemic in terms of finding the time that works for everybody. And so just wanted to, in regards to the recommendation, just want to allow more flexibility for folks to participate when they are appointed.
So may I continue, Chair? So if you get a recommendation for an appointment to the committee, then if your committee meets, say, the next month, and you don't meet quorum, so that recommendation stays on hold, and it continues to stay on hold until you meet quorum, and then you can finally approve the person. Is that your process?
Alberto Quintero, for the record. Sorry, can you repeat the question? Sorry.
Well, I'm just trying to figure out your process, right? So I'm curious if today you received a recommendation for that position, would your process be that you would approve them, or you bring it forth at the next meeting for possible approval? But then if you don't reach quorum, it carries over to the next meeting. So what I'm trying to figure out is if the reason we can't fill the position is because you don't reach quorum to fill the position, that this person would help meet the quorum, and it's a continual problem in that way, and if the problem is the procedure of how you fill the positions. Does that make sense?
Yes, Alberto Quintero, for record. So yes, now that I fully understand now. So the council itself doesn't approve the recommendation. That is an appointed position from the State Superintendent of Public Instruction. So once you receive that recommendation, then the State Superintendent signs the letter off, and then the person is appointed. So there doesn't need to be a council meeting for an appointment for that position.
Okay, so that's really clarifying for me. So has the Department of Education made a recommendation?
Yeah, so we're currently in the process of waiting for the Board of Trustees Association to submit a recommendation. And so we recently received one for the renewal of Stacy Wilkie, who represents Carson City, and she represents the population of under 100,000.
Okay.
Are there any other similar entities that have similar functions as to what your entity does?
Thank you, Chair, for the question. Alberto Quintero for the record. So there are other committees and councils that have or take into account family engagement, but the makeup and the duties and responsibilities of this specific council are very specific in regards to family engagement practices and reviewing family engagement policies, and then also seeking to expand those family engagement practices and strategies.
Now, I know that during one of the last legislative sessions, we removed some reporting requirements from the council to provide reports to the legislature. So we haven't been able to see those and see how effective the council is in increasing parental engagement. So can you talk to us a little bit about how effective the council is in accomplishing its mission?
Yes, absolutely. Alberto Quintero for the record. So in regards to just some of the work that the Family Engagement Council has had input on and members have participated in. So every other year, my position and the Office of Parental Involvement and Family Engagement is required to do a statewide family engagement summit. And so they're routinely involved in the planning of that statewide family engagement summit. Due to the pandemic in 2020 of October, we actually did our first all virtual family engagement summit. And then we'll be also having our Family Engagement Summit again in October 22 of this year. And so we're currently in the process of planning that as well. The Family Engagement Council has also participated in providing input on the family engagement standards that live within the teacher evaluation system that we have here in Nevada, so the Nevada Educator Performance Framework. And the members were also part of the advisory committee that helped develop our statewide family engagement framework. So a family engagement framework that provides a common approach to family engagement, unique to Nevada, informed by Nevada stakeholders, families, and communities as well. And so those are just some of the few accomplishments of the council that they achieved in the past and have worked on recently.
Okay, what do you do with the results of your Family Engagement Summit?
Yeah, so every year, great question, Alberto Quintero for the record. So every year or every other year, we pick a theme in regards to what is something that is really needed in the field when it comes to family engagement. Currently, right now, the theme that we've selected is reimagining education and understanding that education has definitely changed, and especially when it comes to family engagement landscape and due to the impact of the pandemic, and then also the emotional stresses that have been placed on school communities, families, and students as well. And so with each Family Engagement Summit, we provide sessions and workshops for students, families, educators, and educators receive professional learning credit in regards to that theme. And so we bring in local family engagement experts, and then we also bring in national speakers for professional learning on family engagement. And so every year that summit is evaluated, and we take that information and improve the summit in regards to offering more specific sessions that families, educators want. When we had it in person in 2018, for example, something that we knew was a big barrier for families to attend a day-long event was childcare services. And so that's something that we provided in our 2018 summit in Reno. And we alternate locations since it is every other year in Reno, between Reno and Las Vegas. And this year we looked at survey results from the previous year, and then also more guidance for families and some stakeholder engagement that we did on the summit planning team that we created, and have heard from families that they also want to continue the virtual experience just because it's much more accessible. Folks can go back to the recordings after the fact. And we also provided translation services during those Zoom work sessions during that. And so those are the type of comments that we get and the type of services we provide at the Statewide Family Engagement Summit.
Thank you, Mr. Quintero. And I do have one more question for you. Now that the two legislative positions have been filled, I know you haven't met since February 12th of 2020. Do you guys have a meeting scheduled?
Yeah, so I reached out to the two appointees yesterday, actually, and looking to set up a chat in regards to discuss the duties and responsibilities of the council, and then looking to set a next meeting time. On the document that was submitted, that's when we last met, but since then we have met. We met on April 18th of this year.
Okay, thank you. Okay, committee members, any questions? I'm going to go ahead and check with those on Zoom. BPS, if we could bring them on screen so I could see if anyone has their hand raised. Okay, Senator Pickard.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Mr. Quintero, for the presentation. I seem to recall back in 2017, we had a couple of bills that dealt with this organization, this group. And one of them, as I recall, relaxed the, in fact, I think it may be in our committee materials. Let me pull that up real quick. Let's see. Yeah, it was SB 301 dealt with the changing the name, and I think it relaxed the reporting requirements. And then in 2017, in our committee, in the Committee on Education, the Assembly Committee on Education, I remember the discussion being that there wasn't a lot of participation by the board members. There was a financial burden because they weren't being paid. So we made it so that they would be paid to incentivize participation, because then our chairman, Tyrone Thompson, his big push was for increasing parental involvement, particularly within the BIPOC community, because their parental involvement didn't, or their work environment, their family needs didn't really promote their involvement. And so there was a big push to try to engage them particularly and to get their involvement. What I haven't seen is any reporting on the numbers of people that have actually engaged in this. Has this effort reached a critical mass of people, or are we really just educating the same small group of interested and motivated people, but leaving the general population without any significant avenue for support? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Senator Pickett, for your question. And so in regards to the engagement, so just to kind of speak to just the Family Engagement Summit. So that event typically has grown, I think, since its first inception in about 2007, actually. I think it reached about 150 folks. And in these last few years, we've grown to about 400 to 600 folks attending that event. And then it's definitely grown now that we've offered it in a virtual space. Before it was in a physical space. And so obviously you're limited to the folks who are wherever that location is located. So for example, Reno is very difficult, especially with travel budgets and just families in general, to make that trek. And so hence now why we're going the virtual route, at least for now, moving forward. And that's something that we've been asked to do by stakeholders. In regards to numbers, so we provide guidance and best practices for family engagement. We recommend which are the most up-to-date, evidence-based, research-based engagement strategies, one of them being that was recommended home visit projects. And so that's something that districts on their own take up. An example would be Washoe County, who's really taken the parent-teacher home visiting project to heart and has implemented that on almost district-wide basis. And that's something that they continued through the pandemic, going from in-person to a virtual home visit. And so we are an advisory council, and so that's information that we can share to districts and the family engagement folks that work within those districts on which best practices to choose. And I know in Clark County a couple of years ago, there was an effort to also adopt the parent-teacher home visit project model. Unfortunately, that one didn't necessarily take off because with family engagement, it's something that it's a mindset, and it's something that needs allocation of resources. And if it's something that's, just put on someone's shoulders to implement, it's very hard if there's no buy-in from the very beginning. And so each district has their own ways of measuring their engagement. And as we also know in the family engagement field, attendance is a number that historically has been used in terms of how many people are participating in the program. But we also know that with family engagement, there just are certain school communities that attendance doesn't do the say all in regards to how they're engaging and how often and how much they're engaging in their child's educational experience, considering there are barriers, whether it's transportation to going to a school event, getting childcare to be able to go, right? So these are in different shifts in regards to the work schedule. And so we've really focused on, yes, you still want to create these opportunities, but the council and then the Family Engagement Office itself has really advised is the big purpose here and main achievement is the idea of sharing that information. How is that getting to families? And obviously that is a very large, complex task when it comes to the data component of it.
Right.
So I know that was a half answer there, but it's
But you've
the
touched
holy grail
on,
in the family engagement field.
yeah, you've touched on a few of the things that I was interested in. And I'm glad to hear that it's growing. I'd be interested, it's probably not in your data, but I'd be interested to know how many of those 200, now 600 participants are the same people, right? Because we do tend to have frequent flyers that will attend because this is something that really motivates them, and we really need to broaden the reach. I'm wondering, has there been any engagement, for example, with the truancy diversion program with the district court, either here or Clark County or in the rurals? Because they're trying to do much the same thing. They're trying to encourage parental involvement and to try to figure out what's causing the truancy in the first place, and some of those efforts. Is there any cross coordination, or are you pretty much in a silo? And is that, if so, is that because of the regulatory structure, the limitations on what you do, or can you talk a little about that?
Yes, absolutely. Alberto Quintero for the record. So a focus of the council, and especially grown since then in regards to the issue that we see now, especially with the impact of the pandemic, was chronic absenteeism, looking at that specifically and how to engage families effectively. And so the council and the Family Engagement Office worked with some folks in our Office of Safe and Respectful Learning Environment, OSERLE, to provide resources to districts in regards to how do we effectively engage families and then also make that a learning process. Again, the council itself is advisory, and so these are the resources that we can share with districts and make accessible in regards to what is best practice and what we've seen works best when it comes to research, being proactive in the process and not so much punitive when it comes to the attendance of kids, and not necessarily, it's more understanding why are families not being able to send their kid home, right? 99.9% of the time, it's not that the family doesn't care, which unfortunately is a perception that is out there. It's more access to transportation. It's more just, if access to childcare. And so, for example, if a student, a small one, has to get picked up, usually it's the older sibling because the parent is working. And so we've just seen that throughout the pandemic, and just economically, just the impact and seeing chronic absenteeism rates rise quite drastically throughout the state. And that's not something that's only unique to Nevada. We've seen that on a national level. And so now it's promoting practices on how to best engage families and show the impact. And it's a teachable moment in regards to just the impact on a child's proficiency rates and their likelihood of graduation. Each year they are chronically absent. And so that is a major issue. And best we can do is, again, share those resources and make them accessible to the public and districts.
All right. Well, you didn't really address the TDP, the Truancy Diversion Program, but I would encourage you. I know the district court judge here in Clark County who runs that quite well. I'm married to her. So I hear about it all the time, and they are always looking for additional resources and ideas for how to reduce the truancy issue instead of, the typical, what we call the school to prison pipeline, right? It's a means of diverting them, getting them the resources, maybe getting them over to the harbor or some other resources so that they can adequately support their children in attending school. And it seems to me that there's quite a bit of overlap between the two missions, your mission and the mission to the TDP program. I would imagine there's a lot of opportunity there for some cross-pollination of information. I share my colleagues' concerns about the superintendent's lack of appointments. Hopefully, now that we've got that on the record in a bipartisan way, that will resolve itself. But certainly, I would encourage you also to reach out to members of this subcommittee if that does not happen in a timely fashion, because I suspect our chairwoman, who is fairly well connected as well, can help us get that done. So I would encourage that as well. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator. Members, any other questions? I'm going to go to Vice Chair.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I guess this may not be necessary questions, but I'm thinking about how to get the word out about what you're doing, about the committee, about the needs that you have, and I'm thinking about what my colleague Senator Pickard just said, you know, the collaboration piece. There are two members on the board. Well, I think their term, well, one is still, Ms. Henry's term ends in 24. Ms. Malone's term ended in 20. I know those two individuals personally, and they are very resourceful. They're well respected in the community and have access to a lot of community organizations. And so it would be, I would encourage you all to look at who else you might be able to collaborate with. Faith communities, there are a number of faith communities that have programs for students, after-school programs, tutoring programs. Nehemiah Ministry has one where they take students on an HBCU tour every year during spring break. So those are the kinds of things. If it's simply just operating in a silo and there has not been any concerted effort to reach out to others, you know, it's not just the faith communities, but you have also fraternities and sororities that I know for a fact have a real interest in seeing the success of students. You know, like the Divine Nine, their programs. One of the organizations has a quote junior component where they reach out to high school students and help teach, train, and work with their families, with their family members. So, I'm not hearing a lot of collaboration or partnerships, and that would be something that I would really encourage you to do. And I share the sentiment with my colleague. If those things aren't happening at the district level, there are certainly some things that the legislature might be able to do. Let me rephrase that. There are certainly some things that the legislature can do to make sure that the legislative intent is followed. So partnerships, collaborations. Ms. Malone has extensive reach, and so does Ms. Henry, and probably many of the communities that you're saying you have a difficult time getting in. The last thing that I would say is if it's a problem meeting during the day, and, you know, many of the people that are on here, I'm looking at teachers, they probably have to work for a living, not a hobby. So maybe looking at changing the time. 9 o'clock is not a good time for many people who you're trying to reach at this time. And maybe if it's not just changing the time, maybe it's changing the date. How often do you meet?
Well, prior to the pandemic, we met every month, the third Wednesday of every other month.
Okay. So if you could change that to, let's say, a Saturday, and have a pretty tight agenda, and utilizing the strengths of the people that you have on the board, that would probably be a really good idea. I'm going to put one of our committee members on the spot. He's appointed Reverend Cheney, who is a retired Air Force chaplain and has extensive reach also into the community. And I figure probably a conversation with him might help resolve some of those issues as well. Because this is a very important entity, and trying to make sure that students who have a difficult time in school, and parents, and making sure that the engagement is there to support students and parents. The last thing I will say is there was a bill that I carried, I want to say it was 2019, that requires the superintendent of education to include social determinants as part of the rating system for schools. And that seems to me to be it could be an avenue to maximize whatever you're doing, whatever the recommendations are, because the social determinants are in those places of underrepresented communities where parents, either one or both, are working, and we're a 24-hour town. So there are some parents that work day shift, and they come home, and the other parent maybe works swings or mids. And so there are a number of opportunities or options I think that are out there, but I don't hear I don't hear the outreach to them. So, just my comments.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Thank you, Mr. Quintero, for being here with us today. Seeing no further comments from the committee, you're off the floor. Thank you. Okay, committee members, that's going to take us to agenda item 3D. The next entity for review is the Competency-Based Education Network. The Sunset Subcommittee has not reviewed the network since its creation during the 2017 legislative session. Joining us in Carson City is Director Brandkamp from the Office of Standards and Instructional Support of the Nevada Department of Education to discuss the council.
Good morning, Chairwoman, members of the Sunset Committee. This is Dave Brandkamp. I'm the director of our Standards Instructional Support Office from the Department of Education. And this is a little bit different. The Competency-Based Education Network came into effect with AB 110, excuse me. And they've run through everything that was in the bill, including you should be receiving shortly in the next couple of weeks from our superintendent the final report from this group. Similar to some committees, there were some hiccups during the first part of our pandemic, but we were with the virtual set, we were able to maintain having meetings in the last year with them in a virtual setting. Some of the things that did surface was we did have a difficult time in always finding a parent from not associated with one of the competency-based schools. There were 4 pilots when we first started, 2 that were in Washoe, Incline High School, AACT High School, a middle school in Churchill, and then a school within a school in Clark County in Cheyenne High School. Shortly after the pilot, Superintendent Stevens from Churchill brought her entire district on board. So we had all their schools were working through this competency-based set of the pilot and the report, as you'll see. So meeting-wise, we could hold the meetings. The issue for us to discuss as a team here would be how do we want to proceed forward, considering State Superintendent Ebert has convened the Blue Ribbon Task Force to look at other educational sets that helped with some of the work around SB 215. And then now we will continue our work with the outside group called Knowledge Works in trying to present what competency-based may look like for other districts around the state. They've met with all the other superintendents, brought forth these ideas, and superintendents from all the other districts are either considering it within a school or maybe possible other schools to bring this forth. So the question as we look at this as a sunset is, from the way it was written in AB 110, they have met all their sets and have bring forth shortly their final report. Would be the continuation of this or allowing them to work through the stakeholder groups that the superintendent has brought forth. The groups that are currently in pilot still want to continue outside of AACT. They had a change in their principal about 1.5 years ago, and they decided not to continue with the competency-based plan, but all the other schools that are in the pilot want to continue forth and then see this grow. So at this point, Chair, I'll be glad to take any questions or clarify anything that was stated.
Thank you so much. And I do want to clarify that your recommendation, and you mentioned it a little bit in your presentation, that there is already the Blue Ribbon Commission who's essentially performing some of the same functions. And so your recommendation is consolidation with them, correct? Could you walk us through that a little bit more on how, if we do recommend consolidation, in how the Blue Ribbon Commission is already performing the functions of this entity?
Dave Brandkamp for the record. So the Blue Ribbon Task Force took on one of the charges from the competency-based network of looking at what either barriers or things may be in legislation or just even local understanding to bring competency-based forward, or any of the forms of, whether it's personalized learning, mastery-based, whatever districts may look at to try to expand options for our students to explore their educational pathways. That the Blue Ribbon Task Force then met, and as some of you may know, there were some members from our legislation on that then helped bring forth SB 215 to kind of not necessarily break down those barriers, but open other doors, right? So that the districts and the schools could explore ways that we could expand, especially during the pandemic, of the distance learning or other options for students to still get their education and still be successful as they proceed forth. So that committee has continued, and one of their sets was to expand other options, or make sure districts and schools are aware of what that may look like. One of the recommendations from that group, as I'm sure we'll hear coming forth, would be like, what would the portrait of a graduate look like in the state of Nevada? And, how do we open other pathways for students? If it was just a school within a school, how does that work? And they often met with the Cheyenne High School principal and their team, since they were a model of that. So yes, our recommendation would be that we consolidate these.
Thank you. I am going to go to committee members to see if anyone has any questions. Those on Zoom, Senator Pickard.
Thank you. I don't mean to take too much time, but I've always been a pretty strong proponent of competency-based education. When I was a classroom teacher, I taught drafting and algebra, and drafting is a competency-based course by definition. You have to take it a step at a time, and you can't move on from one practice to the more advanced practice without getting the basics down. So I was a strong proponent in 2017 when the bill came up. And I think I was pretty vocal then, so I don't need to repeat what I said. But what concerns me a little bit is that this network isn't coextensive with the mission of the Blue Ribbon panel. And so I'm a little concerned that we're moving away from the idea that much of education can be set up in a competency-based method. And I recognize, as you mentioned, there are a lot of different faces or names put on that. But the idea being that you master one concept or one skill set before moving on to the more advanced. And I think particularly now that we're kind of hooked on virtual means, and at least in Clark County, the superintendent acknowledged that during the pandemic and virtual learning, the kids generally didn't do any learning, that it was an unmitigated disaster in terms of particularly those that didn't have parental support, going back to our last presentation. And so my concern is that if we were to consolidate these two, what gets lost? What is it that doesn't happen in terms of promoting methodologies that allow kids to advance as they are able, instead of those that are just pigeonholed into a single construct? How do we assure that the effort that we started in 2017 continues?
So Dave Brandkamp, for the record again, excellent question. Is one of my concerns. I appreciate your background, since my background was in math as well. So we do see that progress as what's needed. The 4 pilots, if you consider actually the 7 schools in Churchill, it gives us our 10 sites that are working with it. They will continue. Those schools have said that they want to continue down that pathway. Our current work with the outside entity called KnowledgeWorks, they're helping us make sure we have a common definition of what you just described, of what that competency would be. And so to keep that alive in the process, if schools wanted to continue or join in their efforts, that we would then have the supports not only of these, quote, now 10 schools, these sites, and Superintendent Stevens is a huge advocate for them as well. so that they would have a resource to still lean on. The department as in my office, have worked on what would be the competencies in each of the core areas. Those are in their draft form at this point, waiting upon the portrait of a graduate so we can connect them. So that would be that continuation of that work and support them as well. Mary Holsclaw, who is a staff member in my office, she would continue in this work to support the schools as they're coming on in that effort. So both those hopefully would address your concern.
Well, I'm not sure it does, only to the extent that it's my understanding, and this may be simply I've misremembered from 2017 what this group was set up to do, but my understanding was this was set up to promote competency-based education programs throughout the schools in Nevada, not just to prop up certain pilot programs, but to actually promote the idea so that all school districts would offer students, not necessarily in every school, but to offer students competency-based programs so that they can progress at their individual rates and not tied to either social advancement or some other construct. So what it sounds like is that if we were to consolidate, then your office would continue to support the pilot programs to the extent they were looking for it. The Blue Ribbon Commission would, kind of look at the same things, but nobody's out promoting it. Am I misremembering the purpose of the bill, the original bill, or is that going to get lost, that promotional side going to get lost if we consolidate?
So Dave Brandkamp again for the record. No, that will not be lost. We're fortunate enough, thanks to our legislative, there is a small pot of money that's sent to the department that Mary uses to go to each of the districts in her tour, as we would call it, of Nevada to support them and bring that forth. KnowledgeWorks is also doing that as part of the contract under the federal funds that were given to us during the pandemic to help share the message that you're just sharing or saying, so we can continue both of those. That would be her charge, as well as working with KnowledgeWorks to continue to bring out what is it. Most folks, as we know, when we say competency-based, they're not 100% sure what that might be because it's associated, as I said earlier, with personalized learning, mastery. There's lots of titles, and some of that is what we're working on to break down that confusion and come up with a common message so they understand what is this competency-based approach.
All right, thank you. Thank you for your response. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator. And I just want to clarify something, Director Brandkamp, really quick. So AB 110 of 2017 just created a pilot program for certain schools. So by sunsetting this and consolidating it, it was never a statewide program, right? It was just a pilot program for certain participating schools. And but your request to sunset this, it would be a request to just sunset the pilot program. But then you're saying you guys would, for those schools that still want to participate in the program, you would still provide support. And it was 10 schools?
Again, Dave Brandkamp for the record. It started with the 4 schools that I listed. When Churchill came on board, they only brought on board their middle school. Now Superintendent Stevens from there has brought on their other 6 schools. So their entire district is a competency-based district. So that brings us back up with the loss, unfortunately, of AACC pulling back. That we have the 10 schools that are being piloted, Madam Chair. And yes, we will continue to support them as well as any new ones that come on board.
Okay, thank you. Committee members, any other questions? Any on Zoom? Okay, thank you so much, Director Brandkamp, for being here and answering our questions. Okay, committee members, that takes us to the next part of our agenda, which is work session, agenda item number 4. You should have all received the work session document from our committee policy analyst. At this time, I am going to hand it over to Mr. Malgarejo to walk us through the work session document.
Thank you, Chair Jauregui. For the record, I am Cesar Melgarejo, Senior Policy Analyst with the Research Division of the Legislative Council Bureau and the Sunset Subcommittee Policy Analyst. As nonpartisan staff, I can neither advocate for nor against a measure that comes before this subcommittee. I will provide a short overview of the work session document. While this document is designed to assist Sunset Subcommittee in determining what actions it wishes to take, each item in this document may be subject to further discussion, refinement, or action. As a reminder, the subcommittee can recommend drafting either bills, resolutions, send a letter to request certain action, and request to report back to the subcommittee during the next interim, or put a position statement in its final report. The first item on this work session document is the Appeals Panel for Industrial Insurance, which was created in 1999 to review appeals from employers who have concerns regarding their classifications of risk that affect their rates. The panel is made up of 7 members appointed by the governor in consultation with the Commissioner of Insurance. The subcommittee previously reviewed the panel on March 15, 2016, and voted to recommend continuation of the panel without any statutory revisions. During the recent review of the panel at last month's meeting, Nick Stozic, Deputy Commissioner of Captive Services and Market Regulation of the Division of Insurance, stated that the panel meets on an as-needed basis and that 9 employer appeals were heard in the last 6 meetings of the panel, most recently on August 1st, 2018. The panel did not originally propose recommendations for revisions to NRS. The question before the subcommittee is, does the subcommittee wish to recommend continuation or termination of the panel? If the subcommittee recommends termination, is there a recommendation for consolidation with another entity or a recommendation to have the board's duties transferred to another entity? If the subcommittee wishes to recommend continuation of the panel, does the subcommittee want to recommend any changes to the board? If the subcommittee recommends continuation, the members may wish to consider the items included in the work session document on page 2. These recommendations are from the discussion and questions from the chair and the members at the April 20th meeting. These recommendations would amend NRS to remove the requirement that the panel meet as soon as practical and after July 1 of each year, and to authorize the panel to meet at the call of the chair or Commissioner of Insurance. Thank you, Madam Chair, and I believe Commissioner of Insurance Richardson is on Zoom to address any questions.
Thank you so much, Mr. Malgarejo. Committee members, I will open it up to discussion, but I would like to remind everyone that we did hear from our very own member who sits on this subcommittee with us, Terry Rankin, as to why this panel should be continued. But I would like to open it up to committee members if they have any questions of our insurance commissioner. Again, it would be my recommendation that we continue to recommend continuation of the appeals panel for industrial insurance with the statutory change that the panel meet at call of the insurance commissioner instead of as soon as practicable after July 1. But I would like to open it up to the committee members if you have any remarks or discussions that you would like to have or any questions for our insurance commissioner. Okay, seeing if there is no discussion or questions, I would be looking for a motion to recommend continuation with the statutory recommendation. Okay, I have a first by Vice Chair. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, I have a second by Senator Pickard. Any discussion on the motion? Members, I would like to clarify the motion because I did leave one of the recommendations off that we heard our policy analyst go over. And the motion would be to recommend continuation with both recommendations as stated in the work session document. Vice Chair, would you make the motion? And then Senator Pickard, second? Okay, perfect. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Those on Zoom, if you would just please raise your hand. Aye. Okay. Those opposed, nay? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you, committee members. Next item on the work session document is the Commission on Educational Technology. I will hand it over to Mr. Malgarejo.
Thank you, Madam Chair. For the record, Cesar Malgarejo, Committee Policy Analyst. The next entity is the Commission on Educational Technology, which was added to NRS as part of the Nevada Education Reform Act of 1997. The commission consists of 13 members, 7 of whom are appointed by the governor. 2 members are appointed by the Senate Majority Leader, including 1 senator, and 2 members are appointed by the Speaker of the Assembly, including 1 member of the Assembly. The commission was previously reviewed by the Sunset Subcommittee on April 2016. At the work session, the subcommittee recommended terminating and repealing provisions of NRS relating to the commission. It further recommended amending NRS to transfer the responsibilities of the commission to NDE, which is the Nevada Department of Education. As noted in the work session document, these were also the recommendations from the Legislative Commission's Committee to Study the Governance and Oversight of the System of K-12 Public Education. These recommendations were included in Senate Bill 301 during the 2017 session, and were requested on behalf of the Sunset Subcommittee, which proposed to transfer the duties of the Commission to NDE. However, the proposal was deleted by amendment. The Commission was reviewed by the subcommittee at the meeting on April 20th, 2022. In its review form, the Commission recommended repealing the Commission in favor of the State Board of Education's recent work with their Nevada Digital Learning Collaborative. According to representatives from the department, the Commission has not met since 2018 due to several member vacancies. Again, the question before the subcommittee is, does the subcommittee wish to recommend continuation or termination of the Commission? If the subcommittee recommends termination, is there a recommendation to consolidate with another entity or to recommend to have the Commission's duties transferred to another entity? If the subcommittee wishes to recommend, recommend continuing the Commission, does the subcommittee want to recommend any changes to the Commission? Chair Hadagi, Director Brandcamp, which we just heard from, is still in Carson City and may address some questions.
Thank you, Mr. Malgarejo. Committee members, this committee was reviewed in 2016. It was the recommendation of the Sunset Subcommittee in 2016 that it be sunsetted. I think I would, based on the conversations we had at our last hearing, we heard that they had 11 vacancies. They hadn't met since 2018. The work was being done by the Blue Ribbon Commission and the Nevada Digital Learning Collaborative. It would be my recommendation, like it was in the previous Sunset Subcommittees, that we terminate the Commission on Educational Technology and transfer the duties to the Nevada Department of Education so that the Blue Ribbon Commission and the Nevada Digital Learning Collaborative can continue the work that they're doing in this area. That would be my recommendation, but I will, as always, like to turn it over to the committee for any discussion or any questions that you have, and we do have Mr. Brandcamp here to answer any questions. Committee members?
Madam Chair, if I
did
can
you raise
ask
your
a
hand?
question.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
What I don't recall is why it was deleted from from SB 301 in 2017. And I don't recall any discussion on that. Maybe there was, and I just don't remember it, but do we know why it was deleted? Was that just a political maneuver, or was there some pushback and justification for deletion?
Mr. Brandcamp, are you here with us?
Yes, for the record, Mr. Dave Brandcamp, Director of our Standards and Structural Support Office. I don't have that information. I'll be glad to look that up for the committee. Senator, I'm sorry.
No, that's fine. Let me ask this. Do you believe still that it's in the state's interest to consolidate this, to sunset this commission and then roll it up under the Blue Ribbon panel? Are you aware of any reason why we shouldn't do that?
So Dave Brandcamp again for the record. I don't see any reason why we would continue the use of or work with this group, because they've met everything on there. The piece we get each year that we would continue is what's called the Setna report that tells us where the districts are in the use of their technology. The Nevada Ready 21 program that was the majority of their work prior is no longer in place when they were trying to do the one-to-one to some of the schools. That program is no longer there. So technically, they would be just there to hear the report each year unless we put new charges to this group.
All right, thank you for that.
Committee members, any other questions or discussion? Okay, seeing none, I would look for a motion to sunset the committee and have its duties assumed by the Nevada Department of Education.
So moved.
I have a first by Vice Chair. Will that be a second, Senator? I have a second by Senator Pickard. Any discussion on the motion? Okay, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye or raising your hand. Aye. Those opposed? Seeing none, motion carries unanimously. Thank you, committee. Okay, the next item for work session is the Committee on Anatomical Dissection. Mr. Malgarejo.
Thank you, Madam Chair. For the record, Cesar Malgarejo, Committee Policy Analyst. The next entity is the Committee on Anatomical Dissection, which was authorized for creation in statute in 1963. The legislature in 1963 authorized the University of Nevada, which is currently under the authority of the Nevada System of Higher Education, to establish a committee on anatomical dissection. The Sunset Subcommittee previously reviewed this committee during the 2011-2012 interim and voted to recommend the committee's continuation, as well as to send a letter to NCHI urging it to review the authority and operations of the committee and to address the scope of the committee as it pertains to donated bodies. The Sunset Subcommittee reviewed this committee at the April 20th, 2022 meeting. During this review and in the Sunset Subcommittee review form, the chair of the committee stated that the committee is ineffective to meeting the duties outlined in NRS 451.360 through 451.470 and recommended terminating the committee or consolidating with another entity. The question again before the subcommittee is, does the subcommittee wish to recommend continuation or termination of the committee? If the subcommittee recommends termination, is there a recommendation for consolidation with another entity or a recommendation to have the committee's duties transferred to another entity? If the subcommittee wishes to recommend continuing this committee, does the subcommittee want to recommend any changes to the committee? I would note that in preparation for this work session, the staff of the subcommittee did reach out to representatives of the Department of Health and Human Services, NCHI, as well as the Nevada Funeral and Cemetery Services Board. The Department of Health and Human Services stated that they are currently in the process of drafting regulations to govern the certification and operation of non-transplant anatomical donation organizations and do not see an impact in their ability to eventually regulate these organizations if the subcommittee decides to terminate the committee. NCHI also stated that both medical schools and NCHI have no objection to eliminating the Committee on Anatomical Dissection. And the funeral board, they stated that currently each county pays for and authorizes the burial for cremation of unclaimed indigents through their divisions of social services. The funeral board also stated that one of the members required in statute for the Anatomical Dissection Committee is a representative from the Funeral Association. However, the funeral board stated that Nevada does not have a funeral association. Madam Chair, Dr. Gillian Moritz, the chair of the committee, is on Zoom to address the questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Malgarejo. Committee members, if you recall our discussion, we had heard from Dr. Moritz that that the committee is ineffective. It doesn't have the ability to, it currently doesn't receive bodies, and it doesn't have the means and resources by which to hold the bodies for 30 days. And those bodies aren't at the best stage or eligible for college use. We heard from our policy analyst, Mr. Malgarejo, that there is already processes in place within the counties and within the Department of HHS for this. And so it would be my recommendation to terminate or to sunset the Committee on Anatomical Dissection. I will go to committee members for any questions that you might have for Dr. Moritz, who we have on Zoom with us. Any questions or discussion? Okay, committee members, then with that, I would be looking for a motion to a recommendation to sunset the Committee on Anatomical Dissection. I have a first by Vice Chair. Do I have a second? I have a second by Senator Lang. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Those on Zoom, please raise your hand. Okay. Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you, committee members. Okay. Our last item on the work session is the Credit Union Advisory Council. Mr. Malgarejo?
Thank you, Madam Chair. The Credit Union Advisory Council, which is responsible for advising, consulting with, and making recommendations to the Commissioner of Financial Institutions in matters pertaining to credit unions. The council consists of 5 members who have tested credit union experience and are appointed by the governor from a list recommended names submitted by the Nevada Credit Union League. The Sunset Subcommittee previously reviewed the council during the 2011-2012 interim and recommended continuation of the council with statutory changes concerning the relationship of the council with the Division of Financial Institutions. In 2013, the legislature enacted AB 492, which eliminated the supervisory powers of the council so that it functions in an advisory capacity only. The council was reviewed at the previous meeting, and the Commissioner of Financial Institutions stated that if the subcommittee wishes to continue the council, she recommends amending NRS 678.290 to eliminate the language may be held regularly at least once every 6 months. In addition, the Commissioner recommended deleting subsection 6 of NRS 678.290, which provides the members of the council a salary of $60 for each day's attendance at a meeting of the council. The question before the subcommittee is, does the subcommittee wish to recommend continuation or termination of the council? If the subcommittee recommends termination, is there a recommendation for consolidation with another entity or a recommendation to have the council's duties transferred to another entity? If the subcommittee wishes to recommend continuing the council, does the subcommittee want to recommend any changes to the council? And Madam Chair, we do have Commissioner O'Loughlin of the Division of Financial Institutions here in Las Vegas to address any questions.
Thank you so much, Mr. Malgarejo. And I know I will have a question for Commissioner O'Loughlin. Members, this was one that I actually had some concern with. Credit unions aren't for-profit businesses. They're nonprofit businesses. You know, they're owned by their members. And I know after our discussion, we realized that they hadn't met for a while, that this was created when there were many credit unions and they didn't have, you know, maybe communication or open lines of communication with their current commissioner. Now they do, and there isn't as many credit unions. But for me, after the hearing and reaching out to some of the credit union members and people who were formerly on the advisory council, I still felt that there was a need for its continuation. Again, these not being large businesses, right? These being member-driven organizations. I think giving them a pathway to be able to have a communication or have a platform where they can be heard when they need it is something that we should still provide them. It would be my recommendation that we continue the Credit Union Advisory Council with the statutory changes that were requested by our commissioner, which would be changing NRS to read meet at call of the chair. And with the second recommendation, and this is what I wanted to ask you about, Commissioner O'Loughlin, was if I remember correctly from our last hearing, it was the recommendation that we delete subsection 6 of the NRS, which provides the $60 salary because none of the committee members took it, right? All of the committee members would decline the salary, and that's why we're removing it?
Sandy O'Loughlin for the record. Excuse me. They have never, that we could find, have accepted that $60.
Do you think that by deleting the $60 salary, it would cause a hardship in filling positions on the advisory council?
Sandy O'Loughlin for the record. I do not.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner. Okay, committee members, it would be my recommendation again to Recommend continuation of the advisory council with the 2 statutory recommendations to delete the salary and allow for the advisory council to meet at call of the chair. Committee members, any questions for our commissioner or any discussion you'd like to have on the recommendation? Okay, seeing none, I would look for a motion. I have a motion by Vice Chair. I have a second by Senator Lang. Committee members, any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Those opposed? Okay, motion carries unanimously. Thank you, committee members, and thank you, Mr. Malgarejo. That wraps up our work session for this subcommittee meeting. Okay, that takes us to our next agenda item. Our next agenda item is agenda item, let's see. I was going to take us back through presentations all over again. Just one more. Okay, that takes us to agenda item number 5, which is a presentation from the Nevada Board of Homeopathic Medical Examiners. During the 2017-2018 interim, the subcommittee reviewed the board and realized that there were concerns with the board's finances due to legal services supplied by the Office of the Attorney General. At its work session, the subcommittee voted to send a letter to the board, Interim Finance Committee, Office of the Attorney General, and the Governor's Office explaining the details of how the debt came to be and asking them to find a way to resolve the issue of the outstanding debt of the board. And the subcommittee recommended terminating the board and transferring the authority to issue licenses to the homeopathic physicians and homeopathic assistants to the Division of Public Behavioral Health and the Department of Health and Human Services. As a result of the subcommittee's recommendations, the 2019 legislature enacted SB 98, which, among other provisions, required the governor to appoint 6 new members as soon as practicable after July 1st, 2019, and required the board to report its progress in improving its function and performance to the subcommittee during the 2019-2021 interim. During the 2019-2021 interim, the subcommittee discussed the board's progress in improving the function of the board and voted to require the board to report to the legislature on or before the first day of the 2021 session regarding its progress implementing the provisions of SB 98, and recommend a bill draft be requested in case the report did not indicate the provisions of SB 98 had been completed. Such a bill draft request would terminate the board and transfer the responsibilities for regulating the practice of homeopathic medicine to the State Board of Health, the Department of Behavioral Health, and the Department of Health and Human Services. The report submitted to the 2019 legislature has been included in the members' meeting packets and uploaded to the meeting website. Here with us today is Charles Green, Treasurer Secretary from the board, to discuss the board's progress and current state. Before you proceed, Mr. Green, I do want to let the members know that the board did bring a memorandum to the meeting that was submitted. For those who are here in person, there was one left on your desk. For those who are joining us virtually in Carson City, this memorandum or report is now available for you on the subcommittee's website and under meeting materials. Mr. Green, when you're ready, please proceed.
Yes, ma'am. My name is Charles Green. I am the Secretary-Treasurer of the Homeopathic Board, as stated. Of course, the purpose of this meeting is to talk about the progress and the improvements in the function of the board in relationship to SB 98. So just reviewing some of the highlights of that piece of information. The name of the board was changed to Homeopathic or the Nevada Board of Homeopathic Medical Examiners from Nevada State Homeopathic Board of Medical Examiners. SB 98 amended membership to the board, amended the power of the president of the board, amended the fee relating to the licensing and certification of the board. In mentioning that, what they did is put an upper limit on the amount so that we could charge more fees to an upper limit to obviously generate revenue. The problem with that is I'm old school. I'm someone that wants to give a service for increasing fees. So as we move into my report, we'll be doing hopefully a lot of things to improve the offerings and for the licensees and certificate holders. The new board, installed July 9th, 2021, having been reduced to 6 members, there are currently 4 board members appointed and 2 vacancies remaining. This is a 39-year-old board, so it's been around since 1983. It's been around a long time, and it's performed a lot of services for the state of Nevada. Other than being a very small board, it's performed great services. So now we'll talk about a little bit of the improvements and functions and the performance of the board. Currently, we have 17 homeopathic medical doctors. We have 24 advanced practitioners of homeopathy, and we have 8 homeopathic assistants. Improvements to the board administrative function. We have created 15 separate binders that will help us systemically keep the ease and access to sort of the information to the board. And in the report, each one of those binders that we've created are written in the report. As far as the website access and control of security changes, we've achieved quite a few things. The board goes off of a GoDaddy panel, and we were able to get into the DNS and start making the necessary changes to the board's website. We've updated the current listing of all the licensees and certificate holders. We have updated the list of the 4 newly appointed board members, and we've updated the list of the applications and renew applications for the HA, APH, and the HMDs. We've created secure access and password management applications. We have renewed the domain name to GoDaddy. We set up emails for the president and myself, the secretary-treasurer, so that the public can contact us. And then we've updated the contact information itself. We've also purchased hardware and software to improve the operation of the board. The computer I was given was pretty old and outdated, and it needed a computer that could connect to the internet a little more efficiently. We purchased a PDF scanner. I went up to Reno and spent several days there. And we were actually going to move the files from Reno to back here in Nevada because it's pretty hard for me as a secretary-treasurer to operate the board 500 miles away and of its office. So we were going to move the whole entire board down here, but we decided to keep the office up there. I'm also a real estate broker, and I was looking around for spaces for us, and spaces are somewhat out of line for us as far as the revenues that we have. So I decided to keep the board office up there with conversations with the other members. And then what we did is we scanned all the current active records of the board, and we put those in the cloud. So now they're available to the executives of the board. So in reporting on the financial condition of the board, we currently have $41,836.18 in the bank, but we do have an outstanding debt of $111,000 with the Attorney General's office at a $1,500 a month payment. Licensing fees are due and payable in December and January, so that's our source of revenue in those 2 months. The first access to the board that I had was December of 21, even though my appointment was in April. Now, my appointment was, for whatever reason, only a 6 to 8 week appointment from the governor. Now, he has since reappointed me, and my appointment expires in June of 2025. On my first entering of the board office in December, I did a review of the bank account and immediately found some embezzlement. The embezzlement occurred around December 14th. So I was able to call and put 10 stop payments in with Wells Fargo, and we were able to retain and get back all the money. Now, it wasn't any internal issues with embezzlement. The embezzlement was from the net. If you know anything about the net, these bots will go out and ping your account. They'll put money actually in your account. They'll put 10 cents, 5 cents, 20 cents, $1.50, and then over a period of time, after they've done 15 or 20 of that, then they'll try withdrawals. And that's where I caught the embezzlement. they took a little over $10,000 out of the account. I was able to get that money back for the board. So then I wrote a report to the AG's office, and I was a little, again, I'm an accountant by education. I graduated from UNLV, and what my take on it was like when you get a credit card and you max on that credit card and you got to pay 21%, there's an angst there that you can't afford to do that. And so when we look at the charges that the board has experience from the AG's office, I was angsted because we can't overcome a lot of these, and we paid them tons of money, if you will, over the last 15, 20 years, and they have to, understood, they have to represent us. But in relationship to the board's total income, we only took in $25,000 to $35,000 over the last 2 decades. And at one point, the board's fees was up to $175,000. In 2014, to date, the amount of registered billable hours has been extremely excessive. The board, the homeopathic board in the Office of the Attorney General, they should have been a little more fiscally responsible in understanding we didn't have that kind of funds. And I didn't put this as part of the memo, but in 2017 alone, we were billed $46,000. And again, we only take in $25,000. We paid them over $20,000. And I can certainly make this 2017 summary available to the board. As an accountant, we try to find generally accepted accounting principles, and that's the principles of don't go over your budget. And in fact, there was no budget preparations made on the board that I can see of any significance, and that's something that we want to remedy. Generally accepted accounting principles require cost, revenue, matching, and disclosure. And none of that had taken place. So I'm still a little bit upset over and angst over the sheer volume of money that we were required to pay. A lot of that was, as I can see, and I've read every agenda, I've looked at reviewed all the meetings, and it was just excessive. They were rambling on for hours, and we had to, of course, pay the fees on there, so it kept mounting and mounting and mounting. And that doesn't have to be. This board takes in $30,000, and my goal is obviously to double and triple that, and being an accountant and a successful businessman, I want to do just that. But at this point, we've got to get those expenses under control. We just can't afford and hopefully that's not going to happen on our watch now, that we're not going to let those bills get out of line like that. And we're going to try to come to some resolution with the Attorney General's office to address the bill. Our exiting board president, now one thing I want to remind the board that the governor fired or dismissed all the board members, and they were required to stay on as custodial portions of the board as far as the board's function. And then on the exit of the president, he wrote them a certified check for $30,000, dropping the board's amounts of money substantially, and then required a $1,500 payment over the next 60 months. Well, if you're taking in $2,500 and you've got to give $1,700 or $1,500 to $1,700 to the Attorney General's office, that leaves me less than $1,000 of operating income to progress the board. So that gives me an angst that I don't have the operating capital, because we have enough money in the bank now to go forward. It's just the fact that we have to meet those obligations. So we'd like to, and quite frankly, that's not sustainable. We can't keep paying those large amounts when we do have enough money to operate the board and actually get the board to grow, but you need funds to do that. And so that's the dilemma that I'm having right now as a Secretary-Treasurer. How do I go about improving that? So that's my report to the board.
Thank you for being here. We appreciate the presentation and the information that you provided us today. I know I have a couple of questions, but I do want to go to our board members who requested that you be here today and present in front of us. I'm going to turn it over to see if Vice Chair and Senator Pickard have any questions for you. So I'm going to turn it over first and see if Vice Chair has any, and then I'll go to Senator Pickard. Okay, I'm going to move over to Senator Pickard.
Thank you. And just by way of disclosure in the meeting, I did have a conversation with Mr. Green a week or two ago. I don't really remember when. I will say that I'm impressed with how things have progressed since the last Sunset Subcommittee meeting. I tend to agree that there's probably some responsibility on the AG's part over and not any particular AG since this spanned several years. But they probably need to review their ethical duties in terms of representing and advising their clients as to their bills and making sure that those bills are commensurate with the services provided. We as attorneys are always required to be able to justify what we have charged clients, and I'm not confident that they would be able to do that. But in any event, I'm not suggesting we level blame. Mr. Green, my concern, as I stated in our telephone conversation, was that there may not be enough income, even if we wipe out or recommend that there be an appropriation to satisfy whatever the obligation is to the AG's office. And I do believe that they're probably entitled to some, and you can negotiate what that is. What evidence do we have to suggest that there's going to be enough income coming into the board so that you can operate the board? What do you think that the typical budget's going to be? What do you expect, given the small number of homeopaths that we're dealing with? How is it that you're going to meet that budget? And when you say you want to grow it, how do you intend to do that, given that this is a pretty small market in the first place?
Again, Charles Green for the record. The opportunities for this board to grow, remember, this is essentially natural medicines. Homeopathics been around since 1937. There are thousands of homeopaths across the country. India has over 2 billion people that use homeopathics. So homeopathics as a system of medicine, if you will, is here to stay. It's not going anywhere. For the state of Nevada, we can grow that. We have. I looked on the website for the medical group, and they had 575 physicians came on in 2021. And that's just brand new physicians. So we have 49 total, and they have over 500. So they took in more in a month than we have totally. A lot of those guys are just not aware that we even have this board. So there has been zero marketing for this board. And remember, we are coming out of a pandemic. We are coming out of a long delay, if you will. We're talking about at least over a year that there was no appointment in 19 for any of these board members. So there's been a long, long lull of opportunity lost, if you will. People do want alternative medicines, and of course this board does offer that. And we'd like to address that and expand the board in the realm of natural medicines. There's so many opportunities there. People that are involved with homeopathics, I've done a lot of analysis here, and the doctors that we have involved, Dr. Fuller, he put his whole entire life into this. He's a wonderful doctor with a great facility. Dr. Edwards, who is still on our board, has put 35, 40 years, and he's a wonderful homeopath. Dr. Devlin, who is actually on this meeting today, is our president, and he's done a phenomenal job as a homeopath. So we see a lot of potential, a lot of growth. There's over, and I'm guessing here, just on 575 new doctors, there's got to be 4,000 or 5,000 physicians in the state of Nevada. And at least a percentage of that, whether it's 3, 4, 5, would be interested in looking at alternative medicines for their patients. And so I think the potential of growth here is huge. But there has been no one that's put their heart and soul in doing just that, promoting natural medicines. And that's what I want to do.
All right, I appreciate that. I guess the where I was going, though, is have you done any kind of market tests to see if there's current demand? Or are we just going by seat of the pants, there should be people out there?
Again, Charles Green, remember, I didn't get access to the board office till December. And my appointment was certainly several months before that. And so I actually had to change the locks to get access. The former Secretary Treasurer wouldn't let me in the office because she had said my appointment had expired. So what I did was the AG's office wrote her a letter to give me access, and she still refused to give me access. So armed with that letter, I went to Reno and changed the locks. And that's when I started investigating, of course, the embezzlement I discovered and the things that are there. The board does have a wonderful history, but it also has legs with membership. And we're looking for a long time. And we're talking about physicians that are practicing medicine every day. These aren't CEOs. These aren't people like me. I've developed 4 successful companies. 3 of them I still have now. I'm a real estate broker, so I have a fiduciary to do the right thing. I also have a wholesale business and a retail business that are successful. I have products in Whole Foods and Sprouts. Homeopathic products is one of the reasons that I think the governor picked me for this. We sell tens of thousands of bottles because homeopathics work, and they are an alternative. When we talk about Dr. Fau, who is one of our HMDs, his daughter had a serious skin issue. He couldn't get any results from conventional medicine, so he chose to go to Kansas to a homeopath, and within 3 to 4 months, her psoriasis had cleared up. So the people that do study homeopathics, they love the profession. And there's a lot of physicians out there that would like to have this opportunity, but they just don't know about it. I'm a CEO, and of course now the Secretary Treasurer, and if I have just a small amount of funds, and some of the things, I've made 3 trips up to Reno, and not to spend any of the board's money, I rented a car. It's $60 a day. So I had to take my crew up there and the information so we could do the forensics on what was going on. So right there, I spent just a few $100s where if I had flown, it would have cost me several $1,000s of the board's money. So I've tried to be prudent in the monies that we do have and prudent with the monies that we spend. So yes, I want to negotiate a deal with the AG's office. I want to take what little bit of money we have, and I want to promote that. And that's what I intend to do.
All right, thank you for that. And that'll do it, Madam Chair. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator. And I do want to just clarify, it's along the same lines of what Senator Pickard asked about how you intend to increase the revenue. But in your presentation, you mentioned that you plan to triple the revenue, right? And then you said, you don't like increasing fees without providing services and stuff. So, I mean, you were very specific in saying triple the revenue. So, I mean, did you come up with how exactly you're going to do that, increase the revenue? Are you going to be coming and requesting a fee increase? Or were you thinking we're going to have a marketing campaign going and we're going to increase the number of licensees?
Well, we're going to bring more homeopathic doctors on the board. And how are we going to go about that? Well, certainly we're going to reach out, and we can do that fairly inexpensively. Through capturing their emails and sending them information, letting them know they even exist. There's been zero effort for the length of the time of this board. So how can I say I can triple it? Well, we've had 600 doctors that have come aboard in the state of Nevada just in 2021, and they have, my best guesstimate is 5,000 or 6,000 physicians. And we have that information that we can send out to them to say, hey, there are alternatives here if you're so interested. The other thing is things that I want to offer the board. There's software programs now that all the major homeopaths around the world use called Radar Opus. Phenomenal piece of software that lets them practice homeopathics much, much more efficiently. That's a program that we want to offer them, and we think they'll be very excited. But we got to give something back. We can't just keep taking and raising fees. As far as fees, our fees are reasonable, but the SB 98 will allow us to take the fees up to as much as $2,000. And so that will right there double the revenue if we just, from $600 we charge up to $2,000. But I'm a person that I want to give value. I don't want to just say, okay, your fees are higher because I'm an agency and I can do that. I want to give them service.
Thank you. And I just had one last question. You had talked a little bit about what the amount that the Office of the Attorney General was charging for their services. Do you know if that's equivalent to what they charge other boards?
This is Charles Green again. I have no understanding of how much they charge other boards. I did, in the board, or going to the medical board, I did see that Attorney Borderlove had some cases that she was litigating for them, but I also saw that they had a lot of outside counsel. They had 14 or 15 allegedly complaints that they were setting up agenda meetings for, or board meetings for. Yes, we believe that with focus and presentation, we can grow this board. People just don't know about it, and that seems to be the biggest plight. And physicians aren't marketers. Well, I'm a marketer. I've got products on Whole Foods and Sprouts because I have a successful marketing, and this can be marketed properly, and people are looking for alternatives now across the country.
Thank you, Mr. Green. I'm going to do last call for Vice Chair.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First, I want to read something, and I'll make sure that we have it as part of the record. Quote, the homeopathy market was valued at $4,609.55 million in 2020 and is projected to reach 13 million by 2028. So it is obvious that it's going to grow, and from the research that I've done, it looks like it's growing parallel to the green consumer market as people become more aware of climate change. And so my question would be this. If there is no board, how do we make sure that people are really homeopathic doctors? How do we make sure they're not, what's the technical term, quacks? How do we make sure, and that would be a concern of mine, because the market is growing, and it will probably grow faster here in Nevada, since we've got such an influx of people from California, where there's a huge market for that. So I'm trying to reconcile. If there's no board, how do we make sure that the people who, quote, say they are homeopathic doctors, how do we make sure that happens?
Well, without the board, the answer is we don't. And I should have put into my presentation, and I apologize for that, the growing demand for homeopathics across the country and the world. Homeopathics has taken a few hits in that the Australian government came out with a 5-year commission on homeopathics, essentially saying it doesn't work. And that's still reflected on the complementary alternative medicine website for the in Washington, D.C. So nobody's really updated them that they were caught in a lie. There's a movie available, and I suggest everyone see it, called Just One Drop. And they actually caught them in the lies. But unfortunately, they did quite a bit of damage to the discipline of homeopathics. And homeopathic physicians they're caring people. They really do care. How do we grow it? Well, we certainly let people know that they have alternatives. Alternative medicines are used by over 70% of the population. So we know they understand them. We just have to let them know those services are available. And to your question of how do we control it, well, that's our job. Our job as a board is to license these physicians and make sure that we test them to their capacity to understand homeopathics. And we need, they're trying to practice conventional medicine, allopathic medicine, and now we're asking them to practice homeopathic medicine. And you know, there is a demand for both. May I remind you that the practices here from Dr. Pfau, who's a DO and a homeopath, has a wonderful practice, and his practice is exploding. I visited his office. I've been in Dr. Edwards' office, and they're growing. They're growing quite rapidly. So people do want alternatives, and we'd like to offer them those alternatives. But to police this, we have to stay prudent, and we have to talk to our homeopaths and make sure that they're doing the right thing by their patients. And so, we will be vigilant in helping them practice homeopathics. And right now, again, with the advent of the computer, obviously, there are programs that are phenomenally effective. The one I'm suggesting is being used by all the homeopaths across the world right now. And so we'd like to have some kind of program that we can offer it to our physicians so that they can be better homeopaths. This is a very complex topic, homeopathics, and they spend hours with patients, not minutes. And they really do care. And I think that's what's needed to grow this, and it certainly has the opportunity to grow.
So I guess this question would be for our legal staff. What, if any, are the penalties for people practicing homeopathy without a license? What kind of enforcement and what are the consequences? And I'm thinking back, I guess it's a couple of years, where there was a group of people here in the state that were doing something. It wasn't this, but they were calling it this, and so I'm looking more for the consumer protection piece of this. Do we have any laws, any statutes? Do we need to create some?
This is Eileen O'Grady with Legal. I mean, there are currently, grounds for disciplinary action and other penalties in that chapter 630A. So to protect, to provide protection and also for penalties. So there currently are some. I'd have to look exactly which ones they are, though, and we can get back to you on that.
Thank you.
So, yeah, and I'd be interested in seeing that because, as I said before, the market is growing, and I'm concerned that if we don't have this board, that we have no way to find people who are not licensed and make sure that those who are practicing without a license make sure that they receive due consequences, shall I say. So, Mr. O'Grady, if you can get that for me, and just because this is one of those areas of consumer products, if you will, because we're talking about the distribution, talking clinics, we're talking direct marketing, direct sales, that sort of thing. So I'd want to make sure that we have the strongest penalties possible for people who violate the law. Because this is one of those areas of medicine that is 25 years ago in the country was not deemed as credible, but today it is, and there are some doctors who are using this alongside Western medicine. So does that make sense to you, Eileen? Does that make sense? So Grady?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
And Ms. O'Grady, any information that you do find to share with Vice Chair Spearman, if you would just make sure to send that to the entire committee so that we all have it?
Yes, I will.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Okay. Committee members, any other questions? Okay, I think.
Charles Green again. I apologize. I really have only kind of dived into this over the last 120 days. So I've read the statutes. In fact, I've read the last 40 years of presentations from this board, so I'm aware of them. But to put this together, I would absolutely love to keep informing this committee and others.
Well, thank you, and we look forward to seeing the progress within the board. Thank you, Mr. Green. Okay, well, thank you for being here and for your presentation. Okay, committee members, that takes us to our last agenda item, which is public comment. As always, I will start with public comment here in person in Las Vegas and head to Carson City, then for those listening over the telephone. So we will start with Las Vegas. Is there anyone in Las Vegas wishing to provide public comment?
Madam Chair, may I ask a procedural question before we do that?
Yes, Senator Pickard.
so sorry. I thought maybe there would be some discussion or some comment about what the next step for the homeopathic board is. Are we setting any expectations for them to come back and give us an update, or what should we expect?
Yeah, we can, if you'd like to take action, Senator Pickard, on something, we can definitely work it into our next work session. Usually I have the boards and commissions and entities before us, and then during the next hearing, we make recommendations and takes actions. So if you would like to have them come before us, let me know and we can work it into our next work session at our next hearing.
All right, I appreciate that. I just think that he's offered us the opportunity to come back and speak to us and give us an update. I think we should take advantage of that offer and have him come back maybe in the next interim, and if not before the next legislative session, and give us an update about, he's I don't want to use the term speculation, but he's making some assumptions as to growth and both growth in membership and growth in income. I'd like to see if there's progress made on that, and certainly give us to Senator Spearman's concerns, give us more comfort and confidence that that's progressing properly.
Absolutely, Senator Pickard. I think it was your request to have them before us. So if you would like to see them come before us again and take that action, we will work that into our next work session at our next hearing.
Very good. Thank you. Apologize for the interruption.
Again, this is Charles Green, and I would absolutely love that opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Green. Okay, members, we're going to go back to our public comment agenda item. If there's anyone in Las Vegas wishing to provide public comment, seeing none, we will go to Carson City. Is there anyone in Carson City wishing to provide public comment? Okay, seeing none, BPS, would you please check the telephone for anyone wishing to provide public comment?
Thank you, Chair. There are no callers on the line to offer public comment at this time. Would you like to wait?
Yes, BPS, let's give them a few seconds.
Hello?
BPS, has anyone joined the line?
No, Chair. There are still no callers to offer public comment at this time.
Hello?
Okay, thank you. Oh, hello. That is, are you here for public comment? Sir, we can't hear you. I believe you're muted.
Yeah, hello, can you hear me?
Yes, sir, are you here to provide public comment?
Yes, I was. This is Dr. Glavinovich. I was asked by Mr. Green to be present, as well as Dr. Devlin, and they didn't give me the coordinates to get on, so I'm using Dr. Devlin's information to talk. But I'm an MD.
Please state your name. If you would please state your name for the record and clearly spell it for our minutes, and then please proceed with your public comment.
Yeah, this is Dr. John Glavinovich, G-L-A-V as in Victor, I-N-O, V as in Victor, I-C-H. I'm a medical doctor licensed in Nevada, and also I have a homeopathic license in Nevada as well. And I was selected last year to be president of the Nevada Society of Integrative Medicine. And, a lot of the information Charles has indicated, we're promoting and expanding integrative medicine in Nevada and throughout the country. In fact, being president of the Integrative Society, I've reached out to the state of Arizona, who has 100 members, and we're talking about a reciprocity where their members would be in conjunction with us in terms of our board and also the Integrative Medicine Society. So we're trying to promote and expand it throughout the country. And as Charles indicated, patients are clamoring for the integrative medicine approach. They're taking charge of their health. We utilize Eastern Western medicine. Homeopathic medicine includes bioenergetic medicine, neural therapy, IV medicines, orthomolecular medicine, diet, nutrition, detox, naturopathic, acupuncture, and oriental medicine, just to name a few. And since Charles assumed the duties in 2021, and you heard how difficult it was for him to, gain access to his position. He's done a tremendous job and has tremendous professionalism in terms of getting things behind him and improving what has occurred previously. This is a whole new game, a whole new group, and I think it's going to do tremendous things. As we indicated, we were talking to Arizona about affiliating with them. We had a course in Las Vegas the 25th through the 27th of March. We had 125 people there from all over the country and all over the world. And on Zoom, we had people from even the Middle East that attended the conference via Zoom. So I think we're progressing in the right direction. It's badly needed in Nevada. I have been involved with 7 new licensees recently that are going in progress, and I have a whole bunch more that are interested as well. And Charles is just trying to get everything straightened out from before. And I think moving in the right direction, we'll be able to add to that list quite well. So we're committed to making a difference. We have new blood, new energy, and we appreciate your support in this worthwhile endeavor. So sorry, but anyway, I just wanted to get that in on the record.
No, thank you. Thank you so much, Doctor. We appreciate you jumping in. I would have missed I would have missed you. So thank you for being here and waiting patiently for public comment. I appreciate that. You had mentioned that there was somebody else. Is there somebody else on Zoom?
Well, Dr. Devlin is still listed. We have 2 Dr. Devlins listed. I don't know if he's still there to talk or not.
Yeah, I'm available.
Devlin? Okay. Would you like to provide public comment?
Yeah, the thing I'd like to share is that, Charles Green and I, and with some help from John, have really worked hard to try to resuscitate this entity. And there is a dire need not only for integrative functional medicine and homeopathy, but also the surveillance, like your co-chair said, or sub-chair said, that there's a need to supervise these physicians who are doing integrative medicine for a variety of reasons. And to have this board functioning and at the top of its game is critically important, not only to build integrative functional medicine in Nevada, but also to maintain supervision of these physicians and to supervise those folks working under them. They've done a great job over the past 20 years since I've been a homeopath. And I think that there's an opportunity now with this rebirth to do the right thing. And I really want to say thanks to Charles Green for the amount of work and effort he's put in, because without his blood, sweat, and tears, the information that's set in front of you today wouldn't have been available. And we would have continued to have drowned, really, under the circumstances we were left. So thank you guys again for understanding.
Thank you, Dr. Devlin. Would you do me a favor? Could you please spell your first and last name for our committee secretary?
You bet. The first name is actually Sean, S-E-A-N. It's Irish. And then Devlin, D-E-V-L-I-N.
Okay, thank you. And thank you for being here and providing public comments this afternoon. Okay, it looks like those were our 2 attendees wishing to provide public comments. So with that, we will move into our last agenda item, which is adjournment. Members, is there anything that you'd like to discuss before we adjourn? Okay, seeing none, we are adjourned, and I will see you for our last meeting of the Sunset Subcommittee. Next month? Thursday, June 9th. On Thursday, June 9th. Our last meeting. Okay, committee members, thank you for being here.